Fire pits every 20 paces along the perimeter, each one with guards stomping their feet against the cold. On the north side, behind wooden fencing, was the wolf pen. Dozens of massive white wolves curled inside, iron collars around their necks, frozen blood still on their muzzles. Every now and then, one would lift its head, and those cold green eyes would scan toward the tree line. That was the real problem. I'd rather fight 30 soldiers than 10 of those beasts. Men get lazy, get scared, get confused by noise and fire. Wolves don't. They follow scent. Once they locked onto my smell, no amount of sneaking through trees would save me. I checked the wind, blowing from the north, toward the south. The wolf pen was on the north side. Hitaya's squad was hiding to the southwest. If I approached from the west, my scent would blow straight into the wolves' noses. I had to circle around to the downwind side, the east. I moved slowly. Every step, I tested the snow beneath with my toes first, checking for frozen twigs, hidden ice crust, anything that might crack. Then I eased my weight down gradually. Old hunter's discipline. The closer you get to your prey, the less human you need to be. You become a moving stone, a sliding patch of snow. 15 minutes to reach the east side. Darker here, less firelight, thinner patrols. But I spotted something that made my stomach tighten. One guard near a fire pit wasn't like the others. He wasn't warming his hands or chatting. He was crouching, holding a bone whistle, eyes constantly sweeping between the wolf pen and the forest. A wolf handler. He had to die first. If the camp went loud and this man blew that whistle, dozens of wolves would be unleashed into the forest after me. Game over. I drew my bow. Steady hands despite the cold. Every arrow counted tonight. I didn't have many. I didn't aim for his head. Too small a target in this wind. I aimed for his throat. The wind gusted. The fire pit flames swayed. The handler turned his head slightly. I released. The heavy arrow crossed the distance in silence and punched through his throat. He collapsed backward, bone whistle still in his hand, never reaching his lips. 2 guards beside him were warming their hands and didn't notice immediately. Not until his blood crept across the snow toward the fire pit. One opened his mouth to shout. My second arrow went in through his open mouth and out the back of his skull. The third guard spun toward the alarm gong hanging on a wooden frame nearby. My third arrow didn't hit him. It hit the frame. The wood snapped. The gong fell into deep snow with a muffled thud instead of a piercing clang. The guard stumbled 2 steps toward where the gong fell. I'd already shifted position. My fourth arrow came from a completely different angle, punching into his ribs and slamming him into the wolf pen fence. The fence shuddered. Inside, white wolves raised their heads. Green eyes glowed in the dark. I didn't look at the dead men. I was already moving to my next target. Killing random guards was pointless. I needed to kill the people who held this camp together. Messengers, drummers, wolf handlers, patrol leaders. Take them out fast enough, and the whole camp loses its ability to think and coordinate. An 8-man patrol came around the eastern perimeter, led by a small officer wearing iron armor with a bone badge on his chest and a white wolf pelt over his shoulders. Sharper than the rest, when he spotted the dead guards by the fire pit, he didn't shout. He raised his fist and stopped his men. They spread into formation. 2 shields forward, 2 bows ready, the rest flanking left and right. Not bad reflexes, I thought. These weren't street thugs. These were blooded soldiers. But I couldn't afford a drawn-out fight here. Time was burning. I pulled 3 arrows from my quiver and knocked all 3 at once. A technique I'd only dared attempt after reaching full mastery. 3 arrows, 3 targets, each with a different trajectory and timing. First arrow, the lead shield bearer's ankle. He dropped to his knees, shield tilting sideways. The instant his shield shifted, the archer behind him was exposed. Second arrow, through the archer's throat. Third arrow, I didn't aim at the officer. I aimed past him, at the signal horn hanging from the belt of the man behind him. The horn shattered. The officer's face changed. He understood now. I wasn't just killing randomly. I was systematically destroying their ability to communicate. Attack, he finally screamed. But I was already standing half-exposed on a snow ridge 30 paces away. Our eyes met through the blizzard for one instant. He saw a face far too young for this kind of killing, and a bow already drawn to full moon. My arrow went through his face. He dropped into the snow. The remaining soldiers panicked, not because they feared death, but because they couldn't see me, couldn't hear my bow, and their comrades kept dying from impossible angles. Some blew whistles, some beat their shields, some charged the spot where I'd been standing. By the time they got there, I was gone. Just shallow footprints, already filling with snow. The alarm spread. East side attacked. North side wolf pen compromised. Shouts in barbarian language echoed through the camp. Soldiers poured from tents. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. A few dead sentries and a messy wolf pen wouldn't make their commander pull the main guard away from the grain stores. I needed to hit the south side too. Make them think enemies were surrounding the entire camp. I moved fast through the forest to the south. A tall wooden watchtower stood there with a war drum mounted on top. 2 soldiers on the platform, peering east toward the commotion. One was gripping a drumstick, waiting for the order to sound the general alarm. I dropped the drummer first. Arrow through his back. He lurched forward and his drumstick slipped, hitting the drum once. Boom. One deep note rolled across the camp. Every man in the garrison flinched. The second drummer panicked and bent down to grab the fallen stick. As he lowered his head, my arrow came from below at an angle, entering under his chin and exiting through the top of his skull. His body caught on the tower railing, swayed, and fell, landing on the drum face. Boom. A second accidental drumbeat. Those 2 thuds sounded like some kind of chaotic signal. Southern troops poured out of their tents. Enemy to the south. No, the east. The wolves are loose. Catch the wolves first. Protect the grain stores. Conflicting orders crashed into each other. Nobody could figure out how many attackers there were or where they were coming from. Then the biggest tent in the center opened, and a tall barbarian commander stepped out. He was half a head above everyone else. Black iron armor, a full white wolf king's pelt draped over his shoulders with the wolf head resting on his left shoulder, fangs bared. Long face, deep-set eyes like frozen knives. He didn't panic, didn't shout. He looked at the chaos with cold contempt. Shut up, 2 words. Quiet. But they hit like an iron hammer. Everyone nearby went silent. He grabbed a guard. Where are the enemies? East sentries killed. North wolf pen broken. South watchtower attacked. How many? We don't know. The commander slapped him so hard half his face caved in. The guard crumpled. Useless. He stared into the dark forest. I could tell. He didn't believe this was a large force. If a real army had found this place, they'd have gone straight for the grain with torches, not picked off sentries and freed wolves. This was either a diversion or someone clearing the path for the real attack. Smart man. He gave his orders fast. Grain store guards, don't move. 100 personal guards stay on the 2 grain warehouses. Wolf handlers to the north, recover the wolves. 300 white wolf guard, enter the forest and sweep. 10-man squads, shields front, bows rear. Find the archer. Kill on sight. He paused, then added coldly. Release all remaining wolves. An aide hesitated. General, the wolves just went wild. Releasing them all now. The commander, Huyen Gu, they called him, didn't even look at the man. Then let whoever can't control them die first. The aide went pale. Yes, General Huyen. I watched from my snow slope and felt my gut tighten. This commander was trouble. The camp was in chaos, and he still kept the grain guards in place. Only sent 300 into the forest. He'd seen through at least part of my plan. He knew I was trying to draw troops away, not just kill people. And he was tendon-changing realm. Not the weak early stage I'd killed on the wall. The pressure coming off him, even at this distance, was a cut above anything I'd faced before. I didn't try to shoot him. Too far. Too many bodyguards around him. And I wasn't confident I could kill him in one shot. A miss would give away my exact position and end everything. I needed to push harder. 300 in the forest wasn't enough. The grain stores still had too many defenders for Hitayatu's squad to break through. I had to make Huyen Gu send more. Pull at least some of those 100 personal guards away. I had to make it hurt. I'd barely pulled back into the tree line when bone whistles shrieked from the north side. Then the howling started. Not from the camp. From behind me. I turned slowly. Green eyes. Glowing in the dark between the trees. 1 pair. 2. 3. 4. Over a dozen armored white wolves, iron plates strapped to their chests, were creeping through the forest toward me. Low to the ground, noses buried in the snow, following my scent trail like a rope leading straight to my throat. Beyond them, torches flickered between the trees. The White Wolf Guard search teams had entered the forest. I looked at the wolves, looked back at the camp, where the grain store defenses still hadn't loosened enough. I let out a slow breath of white mist. My right hand dipped into the quiver. 3 heavy arrows, pinched between my fingers. Cold steel against cold skin. My heartbeat slowed. To make Huyen Gu send more men, I had to make his search parties bleed. Bleed so badly he'd have no choice but to commit more forces, until the grain stores were finally exposed. I raised the bow. My eyes became knife edges in the dark. All right, let's see who's really hunting who tonight. The wind picked up. The wolf pack exploded forward. I released all 3 arrows at once. The hunt was on, and the roles were about to flip. 3 arrows left my bow at once. The lead wolf was mid-leap when the first arrow punched through its eye and out the back of its skull. It crashed into the snow and carved a bloody trench. The second arrow found the gap between iron armor plates on the next wolf's neck. The spiral force turned the arrowhead into a drill, tore through flesh and muscle. The wolf skidded to a halt, blood spraying, and collapsed. The third arrow skipped between both wolves entirely and flew straight at the wolf handler behind them. He had a bone whistle in his mouth, ready to blow. The arrow went in through his lips, shattered the whistle, and came out his neck. He fell with that frozen grin still on his face. 3 shots. 2 wolves, 1 handler. The forest went quiet for half a heartbeat. Then the remaining wolves went berserk. The smell of blood drove them wild. Over a dozen armored wolves split into 2 wings and started circling me. These weren't ordinary animals. They'd been trained for battle. Losing packmates didn't scare them. It made them angrier. And they had my scent locked in. I didn't stand and fight. I moved. Not running. Retreating with purpose. I know wolves. Stand still, and they'll surround you. 1 in front to hold your attention, others flanking, a few waiting for your legs or throat. Get knocked down once, and you never get up. I slid through the brush, using my loach technique to keep low and fast. Snow muffled my footsteps, but couldn't hide my smell. Behind me, wolf claws crunched through ice crust. Farther back, torches bobbed between the trees. The White Wolf Guard search teams had entered the forest. I could hear their commands, couldn't understand the barbarian language, but I read their rhythm. They weren't rushing. They were pressing forward methodically, using the wolves to flush me out while their shield formations compressed my space. Wolves find. Men block. Much harder to deal with than a simple chase. I reached into a pouch on my belt. Dried rhino meat. I brought it for energy. No time to eat now. I pulled my hunting knife and cut a shallow line across my palm. Blood welled up. I smeared it on the meat chunks, crushed them into 3 portions, and threw each one in a different direction, left into a snow pit, into a cracked log, deep into a bush. Then I grabbed a handful of snow and ground it into my bleeding palm. Rubbed pine needles and snow mud over my boot soles. Anything to dull my own scent. It wouldn't fool them for long, but I only needed a few minutes. The lead wolves reached the fork where the trails split. Their noses went crazy, my fading scent one way, fresh blood meat in 3 others. The pack fractured. A few wolves broke off to investigate the decoys. The instant they separated, I struck. 1 wolf sniffed at the meat near a snow-covered branch. I shot the branch's base. It snapped. A heavy load of snow and ice crashed down on the wolf, pinning it. Tough beast, it snarled and started thrashing free. My second arrow went through its ear and into its brain before it could. Nearby, a barbarian soldier who'd followed a wolf to investigate tripped a crude snare I'd set with an arrow and vine. He went down face first. An arrow from the darkness punched through his back before he could get up. Over there. He's on the west side. Torches surged toward my last position. I was already gone, 3 trees over. This was my pattern. Show myself for 1 shot. Relocate immediately. Never take a second shot from the same spot, no matter how tempting. Loach technique for movement, hunter's instincts for terrain reading, military experience for tactical awareness. All of it blended together. The White Wolf Guard realized fast that I was slippery. Their wolves could track my general direction, but they couldn't pin me down. I knew these woods now, which fallen trees could hide me, which slopes I could slide down, which gaps between rocks I could squeeze through that their big bodies couldn't. A 10-man squad pushed toward me in tight formation. 3 shield bearers in front, 2 spearmen middle, 3 archers behind, 2 wolf handlers at the rear. Textbook. They inched forward, shields overlapping, giving me no clean shot at anything vital. One of them spotted movement. A piece of torn cloth I'd hung on a branch. Found him. 3 arrows flew into the bush. Snow exploded. They hit nothing but fabric. I was already behind them, off to the side. First arrow, the lead shield bearer's ankle, just below his shield. He screamed and dropped to one knee. His shield tilted. Through that gap, second arrow into the archer's hand. He'd been at full draw. The arrow pierced his palm. His own shot went wild and hit his squad mate in the leg. Formation broken. Third arrow, a spearman's knee. Fourth, the wolf handler's throat. His wolf, suddenly unleashed, lunged at the nearest blood scent and clamped down on the wounded shield-bearer's leg. The squad leader hacked at the wolf with his sword. The instant his arm swung wide, my 5th arrow caught him under the armpit and punched through his chest. 10-man squad, shattered. I didn't bother finishing the survivors. 2 more torch groups were closing in. I melted back into the trees. The experience notification scrolled through my mind. Wolves worth 2 points, elite soldiers worth 3. My archery skill was climbing, past 4,600 out of 10,000 toward the next level. But my arrows were dropping just as fast. One quiver already empty, the second more than half gone, and my shoulders were starting to burn. The 300-pound bow takes real physical effort every draw, even with my iron rhino tendons. I glanced toward the camp. Still too many guards around the grain stores. That barbarian general, Gu, was holding his ground. He'd only sent 300 into the forest. The grain depot's personal guard hadn't moved. Stubborn old fox. I needed to hurt them worse. Make him feel like 300 wasn't enough. Force him to pull more men from the grain stores. I fell back deeper into the forest, deliberately letting the pursuit stretch out. The White Wolf Guard were disciplined, but in a dense forest blizzard, chasing a single archer, even elite formations get gaps between squads. I found a narrow ravine I'd scouted earlier, steep slopes on both sides, knee-deep snow in the middle, unstable deadfall and packed snow on the ridges above. Perfect for an ambush. Perfect for escape. I tossed a bloody meat chunk into the center and waited behind a boulder. Wolves came first, then a squad, more cautious this time, shields tight, archers watching the high ground. I let them all enter the ravine before I moved. First arrow hit a dead tree on the slope. It cracked, and an avalanche of snow and ice crashed down. The squad raised shields against the debris, exactly what I wanted. While they looked up, I stood on the flank and fired 3 rapid shots through the gaps. 3 men hit. 1 through the thigh, 1 through the wrist, 1 through the temple. Half his head gone. 2 wolves broke free and charged up the slope at me. I didn't waste arrows. I rolled down the opposite side, and one wolf's paws broke through a hidden gap between rocks. It got stuck, legs thrashing. The other lunged over me as I slid flat. My hunting knife slashed upward through the gap in its belly armor. Guts and blood spilled onto the snow. The wolf's body clipped my shoulder as it fell. I slammed into a tree trunk. Pain flared through my chest, nearly coughed blood. But I used the impact's momentum to tumble down the slope and vanish from their line of sight. Several barbarian soldiers broke formation and charged after me down the slope. The first one was too tall to duck under a fallen log I'd slipped beneath. He hit it chest first. Before he could climb over, my knife opened his throat from the other side. Clean fast. I was already pulling back when the second man's curved sword came screaming down. Clang. My knife caught the blade. The force rattled my arm. These White Wolf Guard were strong. Without iron rhino tendons reinforcing my grip, my hand would have split open. I used the impact to slide backward on the snow, Loach technique, and while he stumbled forward into his missed swing, I drew my bow point blank. The arrow went through his chest and launched him off his feet. I spat blood-tinged saliva and kept moving. Behind me, the forest was full of screaming, howling, and torchlight. Ahead of me, I caught a glimpse of the grain camp and saw what I'd been fighting for. Another squad of armored soldiers was leaving the camp's grain stores and heading into the forest. The personal guard that Gu had kept in reserve was finally thinning out. Then came new sounds. A different kind of formation, heavier, slower. I crouched behind a tree and peeked. Rattan shields. Tall ones, wrapped in wet hide and oiled vines. A squad of elite soldiers moving behind them, steps perfectly synchronized. Behind the shields, 2 shamans in beast skin robes blew bone whistles, not frantic blasts, but a rhythmic, weaving pattern. The remaining wolves responded, spreading out on both flanks in coordinated sweeps instead of wild lunges. This was a specialized anti-archer formation. Rattan shields to absorb arrows, wolves to seal the flanks, whistle controllers keeping everything coordinated. And they weren't charging. They were slowly, patiently squeezing my space. I shot the center shield. My heavy arrow hit hard enough to drive the bearer back half a step, but didn't penetrate. I tried spiral penetration on the edge of another shield. The rattan splintered, the wet hide tore, but the arrow lodged in the shield without breaking through to the man behind it. Anti-arrow rattan shields, purpose-built to counter bowmen. In open ground, I'd have had to run. I tried flanking, shot at a wolf on the right. The beast actually ducked. The bone whistle changed pitch and it dodged, only catching a spark off its back armor. I aimed for the whistleblowers. My arrow cleared the shield tops and streaked toward one shaman's face. But a dedicated shield bearer I hadn't spotted raised a rattan shield to block. My arrow thunked into wood and hide, stopped dead. They had shield bearers specifically protecting the wolf controllers. The rattan wall kept advancing. 10 paces. 8. 6. Wolves on both sides. Steep slope behind me. Torches closing from the rear. The net was tightening. But the tighter they squeezed, the more men they pulled from the camp. That was the trade. I suddenly spun and fired 3 arrows into the darkness behind me. Not at the rattan formation, but at a flanking squad I'd spotted from their torchlight reflecting off the snow. 3 screams from the dark. Their torches scattered into chaos. The rattan formation hesitated, just for a second. I threw myself sideways down the slope. A wolf pounced. I went flat, slid under its leap, and jammed my short military knife up through the gap in its belly plates. Blood poured over me as the dying beast crashed past. I hit a tree, ribs aching, and rolled into the deeper forest. Behind me, the rattan squad finally broke into a run to keep up. Wolves scrambled after me, and from the camp, I heard more horns. More orders. Another group of guards pulled away from the grain stores and sent into the forest. Huyengu had finally cracked. Not completely, but enough. Far away on the southwest slope, Hitaitu saw it too. The armored personal guard that had been glued to the grain warehouses. Half of them were gone, marching into the trees after me. Hitaitu's hand had been raised for minutes, frozen in the air. 50 men behind him gripped their weapons and fire oil jars in white-knuckled silence. Then, from deep in the forest, more screams and wolf howls. Me, still fighting, still drawing them in. Another squad left the camp to reinforce the hunt. Hitaitu's eyes were bloodshot. His hand finally fell. Go. 50 shadows rose from the snow like silent ghosts and crept toward the gap in the grain camp's southwest perimeter. Deep in the forest, I leaned against a snow-covered boulder, listening to the rattan shields and wolf pack closing in from 3 directions. My quiver was light. My shoulders burned. My ribs ached from the wolf collision. But my job was half done. Hitaitu was moving. I knocked one of my dwindling arrows and raised the bow. The approaching barbarians had finally learned to advance in proper formation. Shields locked, wolves coordinated, no gaps. These barbarians, I muttered, squinting through the blowing snow, are finally starting to fight like professionals. I drew to full moon. Time to make it hurt a little more. The rattan shield wall kept pushing toward me. Slow, steady, suffocating. Shields in front, armored soldiers behind, wolves on both flanks, all moving in sync with those bone whistles. Every step I took back, they took one forward. My shoulders were burning. My fingers were stiffening. Hours of pulling a 300-pound bow while running and fighting through a blizzard forest. Even with my upgraded body, I was feeling it. The rattan shields were the real problem. Regular arrows bounced off. Even spiral penetration could only crack the edges without punching through to the men behind them. If I kept trading arrows for shield dents, I'd run dry before they ran out of soldiers. I checked my escape routes. Behind me, a steep snow slope dropping to exposed frozen rocks. Normally a death trap, anyone going down that would break their legs. But it was the only gap left in their net. Front blocked by shields. Side sealed by wolves. Rear closing with torches. Time to go. I reached into my coat and found the empty pill bottle, just residue and sharp medicinal smell left from the tiger bone pills. Useless to me, but wolf noses are 1,000 times more sensitive than human ones. I smashed the bottle, wrapped the powder and shards in a blood-soaked strip torn from my sleeve, and hurled the whole thing toward the left flank. The sharp medicinal stink mixed with blood scent scattered on the wind. The wolves on the left side faltered, confused. The bone whistles shrieked higher, trying to regain control. That half-second of chaos was all I needed. I threw myself toward the right slope. "Stop him!" Someone screamed behind the shields. 2 wolves lunged. I dropped flat and slid under the first one's leap. Its claws caught my shoulder, ripped through my padded armor, and carved 3 bloody lines into the muscle underneath. Pain exploded white-hot. I grunted but kept my knife hand moving. The second wolf came in low. My short blade found the gap between its belly armor plates. Blood and guts spilled across the snow. The dying wolf's body clipped me, and I lost my balance. I tumbled down the steep slope. Rocks, ice, frozen branches hammering my body the whole way. Shoulders, back, elbows, everything taking hits. But I was out of the circle. Short spears whistled down from the ridge above. I twisted mid-roll and dodged 2. The third grazed my left shoulder. More blood. I crashed between 2 frozen boulders at the bottom. My back slammed into rock so hard I tasted copper. Nearly vomited blood. But I didn't stop for even a breath. Rolled straight into the gap between the stones, using them as cover against the arrows raining down from above. I pressed a handful of snow against my shoulder wound. The cold was agonizing but slowed the bleeding. Wolves would track blood scent even faster now. I looked toward the camp. Through the blowing snow, I could read the fire patterns. The Rattan Shield squad chasing me into the forest had pulled more guards away from the perimeter. But the grain stores still had defenders. Not enough had left yet. Hitaitu needed a bigger opening. I needed to cut one more nerve. From my position in the rocks, I spotted one of the wolf controller shamans on the ridge above, standing behind his shield bearers, bone whistle in his mouth, directing the wolves downward. I couldn't shoot through the shields from the front. But from down here, the angle was different. I didn't aim at the shaman. I aimed at the cracked frozen rock under his feet. My arrow hit the ledge. Spiral force detonated. The frozen rock split apart. The shaman's footing vanished. He stumbled forward. His shield bearers lurched with him. For one instant, the shield wall tilted. My second arrow was already flying. It threaded through the gap and punched into the shaman's chest. He screamed and tumbled down the slope. His bone whistle went silent. My third arrow flew at the other shaman. He dove behind a shield just in time. The arrow stuck in Rattan. But his whistle faltered. The wolves' coordination broke apart. 2 of them charged down the slope too early and hit the hidden rock field. One got stuck between boulders, thrashing uselessly. I squeezed out from the rocks on the far side, pressed low, and ran deeper into the trees. Behind me, the Rattan squad tried to follow down the steep slope. But you can't carry man-sized shields down a near-vertical drop. Their formation finally cracked open. They were slowed. I'd bought distance. But not much. Because Huyen Gu was done being patient. Back at the camp center, that barbarian general had reached his limit. His sentries were dead. His wolf pen was wrecked. His war drums silenced. His specialized anti-archer squad was scattered across a frozen hillside. And now his wolf controller shamans, soldiers that took longer to train than 10 regular warriors, were being picked off. He gave the order I'd been waiting for. 200 more White Wolf Guard into the forest. Half his remaining grain store guards pulled away to join the hunt. Only a skeleton crew left around the warehouses. And on the southwest side, he sent supply troops and grain supervisors to fill the gap, not real fighters. Just bodies. "That archer dies tonight," he said. "No one sleeps until he's dead." More torches streamed from the camp into the forest. The net around me got thicker, but the camp's defenses had finally cracked open. On the southwest slope, Hitaitu saw it happen. The armored personal guard that had been welded to the grain stores all night. Finally, more than half were gone. He dropped his hand. "Go." 50 shadows rose from the snow and crept toward the gap. The first team hit the barricade with iron hooks and hand axes. Beast sinew ropes snapped. Spiked barriers were dragged aside. A barbarian guard spotted movement and opened his mouth to shout. A crossbow bolt went through his throat before the first syllable left his lips. The second team moved in carrying sealed clay jars of fire oil. The third team held the rear with blades and crossbows, ready to buy time with their lives. Hitaitu slipped through the gap and glanced back toward the forest one last time. Screaming, wolf howls, torches moving like a fire dragon through the trees. I was still alive, still pulling. "Brother Wong," he muttered, gripping his sword. "Hold on." He disappeared into the camp's shadows. I was indeed still alive, but it wasn't comfortable. Hu Yangu's reinforcements meant my plan had worked, and also meant I now had even more hunters in the forest. Torches everywhere. Wolf growls from every direction. I just dropped a barbarian who tried to flank me when 3 arrows came from my right. I dodged 2. The third sliced across my waist, tearing flesh. Not deep, but it burned like fire. I vaulted over a fallen tree. A wrought-tan shield slammed into me from the darkness ahead, caught my already wounded shoulder. I flew backward into a snowdrift. A spear thrust out from behind the shield, aimed at my chest. I rolled sideways on the ground. The spear bit snow. My knife slashed the shield-bearer's ankle tendon. He screamed and collapsed. I used his falling shield as a step, launched myself upward, and fired straight down into the spearman's skull from point-blank range. Blood sprayed. A wolf hit me from the side. I got my bow crossways just in time. The impact numbed my arms. The wolf's jaws snapped half a foot from my face. Hot, rotten breath washing over me. My left hand held the bow against its chest while my right drove the short knife up through its lower jaw and into its brain. The dead wolf's weight crushed me into the snow. I kicked it off and kept moving. More soldiers closing in. I didn't stay to fight, because far behind me, in the direction of the grain camp, I finally saw something different. Not a fire pit, not a torch, the distinctive color of burning fire oil. Hitaitu was in. My mouth started to curl into a smile, then froze. The fire was too small, only one spot burning, and the location was wrong. That wasn't the main grain warehouse. They'd hit resistance inside. My gut clenched. Hu Yangu had left more than just supply clerks in there. The camp still had teeth. I looked behind me. If I kept running deeper into the forest, I could drag the White Wolf Guard farther away. My own chances of survival would be better. But if Hitaitu couldn't get the main stores burning, tonight was all for nothing. The suicide squad would die for nothing. My risk would be wasted. Juma Pass would still face a well-supplied barbarian siege. And most importantly, the mission fails, 500 merit points gone. That treading snow technique stays on the shelf. Next time I face someone like Hu Yangu, I'll still be too slow to escape. My eyes went cold. I didn't go through all this for nothing. I stopped running away. I curved my path back toward the grain camp's flank. The pursuers didn't expect me to reverse direction. 2 White Wolf Guard soldiers coming from the side ran straight into my arrows. They stumbled back, and I was past them before they recovered. I was heading back toward the fire. I broke through the forest perimeter and curved back toward the grain camp. The White Wolf Guard behind me went into a frenzy, screaming that I was heading for the camp, calling for reinforcements, trying to cut me off. Somewhere deeper in the forest, Hu Yangu heard the shouts. I could almost feel his cold fury from here. He was coming. Fast. But I couldn't worry about him yet. Because inside the camp, Hitaitu was in trouble. He'd gotten his men through the southwest gap and into the first grain warehouse. But the moment they were inside, they discovered the real problem. The grain wasn't stored in open piles. It was divided into separate walled sections, covered with thick beast-hide tarps, weighted down with frozen earth and timber beams. You couldn't just light one spot and watch it all burn. They needed to ignite at least 3 warehouses and the fodder yard simultaneously to create a fire big enough to consume the whole depot. Hitaitu had split his 50 men, already down to around 40, into 3 teams. One for the east warehouse, one for the fodder yard, one with him for the central stores. The first warehouse caught fire. Fire oil hit the tarps and flames shot up half a man's height. But the light also revealed what was waiting for them. A squad of armored soldiers emerged from the shadows behind the grain stores. Not regular White Wolf Guard. These were the grain guarding elite. Heavier armor, better weapons, colder eyes. About 40 or 50 of them. Led by a tall barbarian with wolf tattoos on his face and an easy, dangerous way of moving. Tendon-changing realm. Just like Hitaitu. They slammed into the suicide squad like a hammer. 2 of our men went down immediately, cut apart before they could even throw their fire oil. Hitaitu charged the wolf-tattooed leader. Their blades crashed together in a shower of sparks. Both were tendon-changing fighters, evenly matched in raw power. On another day, Hitaitu might have taken him in 50 moves. But today Hitaitu couldn't afford a long fight. Every second he spent locked with this barbarian was a second his men were dying. The wolf tattoo leader knew it too. He didn't try to kill Hitaitu quickly. He just blocked, pressured, and kept Hitaitu pinned in place. Wherever Hitaitu tried to move, the barbarian sealed the path. The fodder yard was the critical target. Hitaitu screamed at his men to burn it. Without fodder, the barbarians' pack animals and sledge beasts would starve, and even if some grain survived, they couldn't transport it through the snow. Our men charged the fodder yard with fire oil jars. But the grain guard elites split forces and blocked them. Barbarian soldiers were hacking down our men, while others grabbed snow and wet hides to smother every flame that started. The fire at the fodder yard sputtered, barely alive. A few more seconds of smothering, and it would go out completely. That's when I arrived at the side slope overlooking the camp. I was bleeding from the shoulder. My waist had been grazed by an arrow earlier. My arms felt like they'd been filled with lead. But my bow was steady. I didn't waste breath on greetings. Hitaitu saw me and grinned through a mask of blood. Brother Wong. Perfect timing. I was already drawing. The wolf tattoo leader had Hitaitu locked down, blade to blade. I put an arrow into the gap under his right arm. He was fast, tendon-changing reflexes. He twisted and caught my arrow on his sword edge. But spiral penetration doesn't care about parries. The rotational force exploded through his blade and into his arm. I heard the crack from 50 paces away, not a full break, but his wrist bones and forearm muscles went numb. His sword stroke wavered for just a fraction of a second. That fraction was enough for Hitaitu. His eyes blazed. He stepped in with a rising slash that found the gap in the barbarian's chest armor. The blade bit deep, bone deep. The wolf tattoo leader staggered back. Hitaitu didn't let up. Second strike took his sword hand. Third strike took his head. Blood sprayed across the firelight. Hitaitu was free, but the battle wasn't over. The fodder yard fire was dying. Barbarian soldiers were smothering it with snow and hides. I shifted my aim and started picking off everyone who was putting out fires. One man lifting a snow block toward the flames. Arrow through his neck. He flew backward and crashed into an unbroken fire oil jar. The jar shattered. Black oil splashed across dry grass, wood frames, and hide coverings. The dying fire roared back to life. A barbarian running for a water bucket. Arrow through his kneecap. He screamed and rolled into the fire's edge. A squad leader trying to organize a bucket line. First arrow broke his wrist. Second went through his forehead. I didn't try for fancy kills or high-value targets anymore. Whoever was fighting the fire, I shot. Whoever was blocking our men, I shot. Whoever was reaching for an alarm gong, I shot first. The fodder yard finally caught properly. Dry grass, wooden sheds, animal hides, and fire oil all feeding each other. Flames climbed into the night sky, so bright that even the blizzard couldn't hide the glow. Sparks flew like stars. Hitaitu saw the fire, and his face loosened for half a second, then went hard again. The second warehouse fire wasn't fully established. The third hadn't been touched. East Warehouse. 2 teams, go. The survivors, less than half the original 50, grabbed their last jars of fire oil and threw themselves at the eastern stores. The things I watched those men do will stay with me. One young soldier took a barbarian's sword through his shoulder, nearly split in half. He didn't fall. With his last strength, he hurled his oil jar into the hottest part of the fire. Another had his leg chopped off at the knee. He crawled on his belly to the grain pile, pushing his oil jar ahead of him inch by inch. A barbarian speared him through the back. He clamped down on the jar with both arms and screamed at his comrade. Light it. A fire starter flew. Another explosion of flame. These men were buying every inch of fire with their lives. I kept shooting, arrow after arrow, covering their advance, killing anyone who tried to stop the burning. Then my ears caught something from the forest behind me. Heavy, organized footsteps. Controlled wolf howling, not scattered, but rhythmic. Bone whistles directing the pack. I looked up. Through the blowing snow, a wave of torches was flowing back from the forest toward the camp. Huyengu had turned around, and he was bringing everyone with him. A dark mass of white wolf guard poured toward the camp gates like a moving iron cloud. My stomach dropped. Too fast. Hitaiatu's men hadn't finished. The grass yard was burning, one warehouse was on fire, but the other stores were still standing. If the main force got back before we burned everything, this whole night would only count as half a success. Half wasn't enough. Not for the mission, not for Juma Pass, and not for my 500 merit points. I looked down at my quiver, almost empty. A handful of arrows left after hours of fighting. Killing sentries, breaking wolf pens, luring hundreds of soldiers into the forest, fighting my way back to the camp. My shoulders screamed. My left shoulder wound was still bleeding. The gash across my waist pulsed with every heartbeat. But below me, there was an unlit fire oil jar lying in the snow near the east warehouse. A dead soldier lay beside it. The jar had rolled halfway to the fire line, but stopped, 10 paces short. If nobody pushed it the rest of the way, that oil was wasted. I drew another arrow. My fingers found the bowstring. Across the camp, Huyen-gu had reached the gate. Through the smoke and snow, I could feel his gaze lock onto me on the slope. He pointed his sword at me. Kill him. A squad of White Wolf Guard peeled off and charged toward my position. I ignored them. My eyes were on that oil jar by the east warehouse. On the gap in the fire. On the burning that still needed to happen. Hurry up, I muttered. Whether to Tai-Tu or to myself, I wasn't sure. I released. The arrow streaked into the firelight. I dragged myself into the forest, and the first thing I felt wasn't relief or fear. Just pain. Everywhere. Left arm where the wolf had bitten me, burning. Shoulder where the throwing spear had grazed me, throbbing. Split knuckles, stinging with every twitch. And my chest, where I'd taken that glancing blow from Huyen-gu's blade. It felt like someone had shoved a red-hot iron brick inside my ribcage. Every breath hurt. I leaned against a tree and sucked in cold air. Bad idea. Smoke and snow rushed down my throat, and I nearly coughed my lungs out. I slapped my hand over my mouth and choked it down. Couldn't afford noise right now. The grain depot was burning behind me. The sky glowed red. Black smoke rolled through the forest. I could hear barbarians screaming, pack animals panicking, timber cracking in the flames. It was burning well, burning beyond saving. But I wasn't in any position to admire my work. Admiring is for living people. Dead people get admired by others. I had no interest in becoming a trophy skull on Huyen-gu's wall. My arrows were gone. My short knife was gone. My stamina was almost gone. I was covered in wounds and reeking of blood. What I still had, my steel bow, useless without arrows, but heavy enough to crack skulls, and half a length of iron chain I'd grabbed off a dead wolf's collar. I looked at the chain. Bloody, frozen, still had chunks of wolf fur stuck to it. Great. 5 minutes ago, I was a sniper. Now I'm swinging a dog leash. Pathetic. But in this world, a man running for his life can't be picky. A chain beats empty hands. First problem, blood. I was leaking it everywhere. Snow wolves track by scent. Right now I might as well be running through the forest waving a flag that said, "Free meal, come and get it." I pressed snow into the worst wound on my left arm. The cold was excruciating, made my eye twitch, but the bleeding slowed. This military merit is costing me blood by the pint. Then the bone whistles started behind me. Sharp, piercing, cutting through the wind. Wolf howls followed. Organized ones. They were coming. I didn't run. Straight line running against wolves in deep snow is suicide. You're just leading them to dinner. Especially in my current state. Instead, I tore off a bloody strip of sleeve, tied it to the chain's end, and threw it into a bush on my right, leaving a false scent trail in the snow. Then I circled the other way, looped the rest of the chain around a tree trunk, and jammed my bow into a snow-heavy branch overhead, bending it down like a spring. The trap was crude. Ugly even. On a good day I'd do better. But I didn't have a good day. I had maybe 30 seconds. Sometimes traps are like people. Elegant is nice. But nasty works too. A wolf came sniffing through the snow. Iron armor plates on its chest, green eyes scanning. It caught the blood rag scent and lunged toward the bush. Behind it, 2 White Wolf Guard soldiers advanced with shields up, moving carefully. They'd learned from earlier. The wolf reached the bush, sniffed the bloody rag, found no human. It jerked its head up, confused. Now, I released the bow. The bent pine branch snapped upward. A heavy load of snow crashed down on the wolf, blinding it for one heartbeat. I burst out from behind my tree, whipped the chain around the wolf's neck, looped it once around the trunk, and hauled backward with everything I had. The chain went taut. The wolf's head wrenched back. Its claws tore at the snow, trying to pull free. This thing was insanely strong. It felt like I'd lassoed a runaway bull. My feet skidded forward. My left arm wound ripped open again, blood running down my wrist. Still got some fight in you, huh? I didn't try to outmuscle it. That would be choosing a stupid way to die. I braced against the tree trunk for leverage and grabbed my steel bough with my free hand. First swing, hit its ear. The wolf barely flinched. Second swing, caught it near the eye. Blood sprayed. Third swing, I put every ounce of strength into it and drove the bough straight into the collapsed eye socket. The massive body went rigid. Legs twitched. Then it went limp. I let go of the chain and collapsed against the tree, chest heaving. My throat tasted like rusty iron. These animals are harder to kill than the Black Tiger Gang. Then I reconsidered. The Black Tiger Gang was weaker, sure, but they talk more trash. At least wolves don't run their mouths. The two White Wolf Guard soldiers were on me now. They'd watched me strangle their armored war wolf with a chain and beat it to death with a bough. That seemed to bother them. One of them cursed in barbarian language. I couldn't understand the words, but I could read the tone. Wasn't a compliment. They came in smart. One with shield, one with blade, covering each other. No reckless charges. I sighed internally. Enemies with brains are the worst kind. I didn't fight head-on. I wrapped one end of the chain around a tree root and let the rest trail into the snow, half buried. Then I stepped back and deliberately stumbled. The shield bearer pressed forward. 1 step. 2. 3. His ankle caught the hidden chain. His balance broke. I was on him from the side, both hands on the bough, smashing it down on the back of his helmeted skull. Clang. The helmet dented. He face-planted into the snow. I didn't finish him. The second man's sword was already swinging. I snatched a short knife from the fallen soldier's belt and threw myself sideways. The curved blade shaved a strip off my padded armor at the shoulder. I rolled into a snow depression, gripping my stolen knife, and felt a tiny bit better. Not my knife. But killing doesn't check ownership papers. If it cuts, it works. Thanks for the loaner, I whispered politely to the unconscious man. He probably wouldn't appreciate the courtesy. Short knife in hand, I'd upgraded from pathetic bowman swinging a dog chain to wounded but still stabby pathetic bowman. Progress. Then a chill shot up my spine. Not wind. Pure killing intent. I threw my bow up on instinct. Clang. A massive curved sword crashed into the bow's steel frame. The impact blasted me off my feet. I flew backward through a dead branch, rolled twice in the snow, and barely stopped myself from tumbling into a ravine. Blood rose in my throat. I swallowed it back down. Huyengu stepped out of the blizzard. Black armor. White Wolf King pelt. Bloodstained sword. The distant firelight stretched his shadow across the snow like a dark tower. He looked at his knocked-out bodyguard, then at his strangled wolf. His face could have frozen water colder than it already was. I propped myself up on my bow and grinned at him. Probably looked terrible. Blood on my face, torn armor, shaking hands. But I grinned anyway. Raising wolves must cost you guys a fortune, huh? He understood. His eye twitched. Good. Trash talk isn't a real weapon, but it has its uses. Can't kill a man, but you can definitely annoy him. Then he said something that wiped my grin away. Skin-tempering realm? My heart skipped. That close-range exchange just now, when his sword hit my bow and I went flying. He'd felt my blood energy level. My cover was blown. He knew I wasn't tendon-changing. I said nothing. His expression changed. Before, it had been fury and killing intent. Now, underneath that, I saw something new. Genuine wariness. You're only skin-tempering? He asked it again. Slower. Heavier. I could read his thoughts on his face. A mere skin-tempering warrior had infiltrated his camp, killed his sentries, wrecked his wolf pen, drawn hundreds of his elite soldiers into a forest chase, burned his entire grain depot, killed wolves and bodyguards in close combat with no weapons, and was still standing. If I'd been tendon-changing, he would have thought, tough opponent. But skin-tempering? That was different. That meant potential. Terrifying potential. If someone like me survived tonight, broke through to the next realm, and came back to the battlefield, the threat would be enormous. Then I definitely can't let you live. He raised his sword slowly. My gut clenched. This guy was too smart to bait. A dumber man would have charged in talking trash, giving me openings. Huyengu didn't. He signaled his remaining bodyguards. They spread out. Wolves moved to the flanks. Wolf handlers fell back. Huyengu took the center. He was going to squeeze me. Slowly, methodically, giving me zero room to slip away. No gaps. No tricks. Just pressure from every direction until I had nowhere left to go. I cursed under my breath. I compliment your brains, and you actually go and use them. I turned and ran. Not because I'm brave. Because I'm very, very not stupid. Peak skin tempering against mid-level tendon changing, with no arrows, covered in wounds, and surrounded? Standing to fight would be choosing the dumbest possible way to die. I dove into a low stretch of forest where the ground dipped. The wind was blowing smoke from the burning grain depot straight through these trees. Thick, black, choking clouds of it rolling along the ground. Smoke. Beautiful, horrible smoke. Normal people hate smoke. Escaping people love it. It kills visibility, scrambles scent, and makes wolf noses useless. Sure, it also makes you feel like you're breathing fire. But compared to being chopped in half by Huyengu, a little coughing felt downright gentle. I plunged in. The white wolf guard behind me hesitated, too smart to charge blind into zero visibility. But a wolf came through anyway, low and fast. I was already crouched behind a tree, heard its claws on frozen snow, whipped the iron chain across the ground, and tangled its front legs. It crashed forward. I was on it instantly, jammed the stolen knife into the gap between its neck armor plates, and drove the blade home with a bow strike to the handle. Blood sprayed across my face. The wolf shuddered and went still. I yanked the knife free and started to pull back. Then every hair on my neck stood up. I threw myself sideways. Crack. The tree I'd been hiding behind split in half. Clean through the trunk. One swing from Huyengu's sword. He stood in the smoke like a demon. Couldn't see me clearly, but he didn't need to. He could hear. Wind, snow, breathing, footsteps. His battlefield instincts read everything. I could fool his soldiers. I could fool his wolves. Smoke helped with both. But Huyengu himself? His experience and killing sense were on another level entirely. Every trick I pulled only bought seconds. I slipped deeper into the smoke. He followed. His blade kept slashing through the haze, each swing close enough to make me flinch. One cut sliced open the back of my padded armor from shoulder to waist. Cold wind rushed through the gap. "You've got no manners," I muttered. Chasing a man is one thing. Stripping his clothes is another. He didn't respond. Didn't banter. Didn't take the bait. I was genuinely annoyed. An opponent who won't engage in trash talk makes a fight deeply unsatisfying. Meanwhile, somewhere out there, Hitaitu was running. His squad had done it. The grain depot was burning. All of it. Grass stores, multiple warehouses, supply sheds. But the cost had been savage. 50 men went in. During the burning, more than half died, fighting through the fire, smashing oil jars into flame, while barbarian elite guards hacked them apart. By the time Hitaitu cut his way out through the southwest gap, maybe a dozen were still moving. Several of those were being carried. Every one of them was wounded. Burned faces, arrows in chests, missing chunks of flesh. Dripping blood with every step through the snow. Hitaitu looked back at the inferno and wanted to scream that they'd done it. But his throat was locked shut. A young soldier asked, "Commander, where's Brother Wong?" Hitaitu's face went rigid. He knew where I was. I'd dragged Huyengu and his main force into the forest to buy them this escape window. An old veteran said, "Should we go back for him?" Hitaitu was silent for a moment. Then he shook his head hard. "Go back and do what? We can barely walk. We're bleeding worse than a pig farm. We go into those trees, and we're just feeding the wolves. He's alone in there. One man, moving fast, using tricks. He's got a chance. We show up clanking and bleeding. We kill that chance. The grain is burned. Someone has to bring this news back to Juma Pass. That's what Wang Qing risked his life for. Not so we could go back and play heroes. So we could survive," a soldier asked quietly. "What about him?" Hitaitu's eye twitched. "That kind of man doesn't die easy." He said it like he believed it. I don't think he did. They ran. And behind them, the barbarians gave chase. The retreat was a slaughter in slow motion. The young soldier with the cut leg was the first to fall behind. He couldn't keep up. He knelt in the snow, smiled at Hitaitu, and said, "Don't look back." Then he turned around, lit the last fire oil residue on his own clothes, and tackled 2 pursuing barbarians. All 3 went up in flames together. The old veteran was next. Running alongside Hitaitu, he suddenly pushed a wounded comrade into the commander's arms. "Take him." "Shut up and keep running," Hitaitu snarled. The old man grinned. "My guts are hanging out. You just haven't noticed." Hitaitu looked down. The veteran's waist was bound tight with cloth strips, but blood had soaked through everything below. The old man turned back with his sword, and held a narrow slope for about 15 seconds. 15 seconds of one man against many. Then they cut him down. But those seconds let Hitayatu's group gain distance. One by one, they fell. Each time, someone stayed behind. Someone smiled and told Hitaitu to keep going. Someone fought for a few more breaths so the rest could run a few more steps. Hitaitu didn't say a word through any of it. Couldn't. By the end, 2 men were left with him. Then 1. Then the last man stopped on a snowy ridge, an arrow in his chest, face white as paper. He pressed a bloody military identification tag into Hitayatu's hand. Take this back? Take it yourself? Hitaitu grabbed the man's collar. The man smiled. I might drop it on the way. He turned around, sat against a rock facing the pursuers, and raised his crossbow. Go. You're the trial centurion. You have to make it back alive. Hitaitu finally lost his composure. This trial centurion is going to be trialed to death by you bastards. He turned and ran. Behind him, 3 crossbow strings snapped. Then silence. 50 men went out. 1 came back. That kind of merit weighs enough to crush a man's shoulders. Deep in the forest, I was running out of everything. I didn't know if Hitaitu had made it. Didn't know how many of the 50 were still alive. All I could do was keep dragging Huyengu deeper into the trees. The farther I pulled him, the better their chances. I stumbled and crashed my way to a steep slope I'd noticed earlier during my approach. The slope was loaded with thick snow, and at its base stood a frost-split old pine, half its roots hanging in the air, crown heavy with packed snow and dead branches. Not stable enough for a real avalanche, but enough for a small collapse. Problem was, I had almost no strength left, and Huyengu wasn't stupid enough to walk right under it. But his bodyguards and wolves might. I wedged the stolen knife into the cracked tree roots, twisted to widen the gap, looped one end of my chain around the damaged roots, the other around a jutting rock at the base of the slope, creating a lever point. Crude. Ugly. Any half-smart person would see something was wrong. Huyengu saw it. He hung back, but his bodyguards and wolves had already pressed forward to the base of the slope. Close enough. I swung my steel bow and smashed it into the taut chain. Clang. The chain snapped tight. The already split roots gave way. Crack. Half the old pine toppled, dragging its load of packed snow, dead wood, and frozen debris down the slope. Not a real avalanche, just a small collapse. But in the narrow space at the bottom, it was devastating. Shield-bearing bodyguards were swept off their feet. A wolf got crushed under falling timber. Snow buried everything in a churning white wave. Huyengu reacted fastest, stepped back, cut through the falling debris with his sword. The snow wave didn't touch him, but it stopped him. For 1 heartbeat. 1 heartbeat was all I needed. I ran. Behind me, Huyengu's roar tore through the storm. XI Archer. I actually smiled at that. At least he still didn't know my name. Having your face remembered is bad enough. Keeping your name secret for 1 more day is 1 more day of advantage. I dragged my injured leg into a snow-covered ravine and kept going. Behind me, wolf howls still echoed through the blizzard, but the firelight was fading. I looked down at my empty quiver, looked at my shredded left arm. Arrows gone, blood energy nearly drained, body wrecked, but I was alive, and alive means there's still a chance. Far behind me, Huyengu stood on the snowy slope, sword in hand. The snow settled around him. His face was iron dark. He knew I wasn't dead. No body in the snow, just a trail of bloody footprints leading deeper into the forest. Xiao Archer, he said, each word bitten off like breaking ice. I will remember you. In the ravine, I wiped blood from my mouth. Huyengu, I'm keeping score too. I propped myself up on my steel bow and limped onward, deeper into the wind and snow. I stumbled through the blizzard leaning on my steel bow like a crutch. Walking is generous. It was more like crawling upright. If someone dropped me on a street corner back in Qingyo town, beggars would probably toss coins in my lap out of pity. My left arm was chewed raw from wolf bites. Shoulder wound torn open. Both hands split at the base of the thumbs. Chest felt like someone had stuffed a hot coal inside. Every breath tasted like iron. I still had a short knife, stolen off that white wolf guard soldier, but no sheath. The blade kept poking me in the hip through my belt with every step. You'd think a captured weapon would be nicer to its new owner. I muttered that, then coughed. Blood in the cough. I shut my mouth. Talking was costing me energy I didn't have. Important discovery. When you're almost dead, don't waste breath on being clever. Every quip costs a long. Behind me, the wolf howling had faded into the distance. But I didn't relax for a second. Gu wasn't the type to give up after one little avalanche trick. He was probably regrouping, figuring out which direction I'd gone. My biggest problem was blood. I was leaving a scent trail a blind wolf could follow. I stopped by a tree, ripped off more sleeve fabric, and packed the worst wounds with frozen snow. Agonizing. Felt like someone was shoving needles into raw meat. But the bleeding slowed. I smeared blood on a broken branch, carved some rough barbs into it with the knife, and threw it down a different ravine to create a false trail. Then I picked my way across exposed rocks, trying not to leave clean footprints in the snow. No arrows. No real stamina. No more forest warfare tricks. My entire survival strategy had been reduced to trick them if possible, hide if I can't trick them, run if I can't hide. And if I can't run, curse my luck and fight to the death. I kept moving toward where I thought Juma Pass should be. Hard to tell in the dark. No stars through the blizzard. Just the glow of the burning grain depot behind me and the general slope of the mountain to guide me. Then I heard something ahead. Not wolves. Wolves move lighter, smoother. This was heavy, uneven footsteps. Someone injured, pushing through snow on willpower alone. I ducked behind a tree and gripped the knife handle. In my current state, I couldn't afford to look weak. Half the time, whether an enemy kills you depends not on whether you can actually fight, but on whether they think you'll be easy to kill. A figure lurched out of the snow. Big shoulders. Wide frame. Leaning on a bent, chipped sword. Half his body soaked in blood. Helmet gone. Armor smashed. Face burned black and red in patches. Eyebrows half singed off. It took me a moment to recognize him. He Taidu. His head snapped up. The sword swung horizontal instantly. Who? Voice like sandpaper scraping a metal pot. I stepped out from behind the tree. Relax. It's me. He stared for a long time. Then his eyes went round. Brother Wong. He looked at me like he was seeing a ghost. Or rather, like a ghost was seeing me and getting scared. You're alive? I looked down at myself. Torn armor. Blood everywhere. Wolf-chewed arm. Knife wounds. Face covered in soot. Hair singed into a weird curl on one side. I grinned. For now. But if you keep shouting, the barbarians will help remove that for now part. He shut up fast. He slumped against a tree trunk and seemed to deflate, like his bones had been pulled out. I already knew the answer, but I asked anyway. The others, silence. Snow fell on his bloody face and melted into the gore. His fingers went white around the sword handle. After a long time, he spoke. 2 words. All gone. The words dropped into the snow like stones. He told me. Voice barely there. More than half died during the burning. Maybe a dozen made it out. Then the barbarians chased them. One by one, the survivors stayed behind to buy time for the rest. The young soldier whose leg was cut, he smiled, said, "Don't look back," then lit himself on fire and tackled 2 pursuers. The old veteran who was running beside Hitaitu, he suddenly pushed a wounded comrade into Hitaitu's arms and said, "Take him." Hitaitu yelled at him to keep running. The old man laughed. "My guts are hanging out. You just haven't noticed." He held a narrow slope with one sword for 15 seconds. Then they cut him down. But those 15 seconds saved the rest. The last one was a kid with an arrow in his chest. He pressed his blood-crusted military identification tag into Hitaitu's hand and said, "I'm afraid I'll drop it on the way." Then he sat down in the snow, aimed his crossbow at the pursuers, and told Hitaitu to go. "These bastards," Hitaitu said, and tried to laugh. It sounded worse than crying. Every day in camp, they fought over food like dogs. Slacked off whenever they could. But when it was time to die, how did they all suddenly know exactly what to do? His shoulders shook. He didn't cry out loud. Men like him go quiet when they really break. I leaned against another tree and let out a long white breath. I wanted to say something. They died well. The grain burned. We'll make sure they get credit. All true statements. But right then, they would have felt too light. Dead men can't hear you. And living men don't always need words. So I only said one thing. You have to make it back alive. He looked up at me. If you don't go back, nobody knows how they died. The merit report will just say suicide squad, grain burned, 50 casualties. They might not even list all the names. His eyes went red. You go back? I continued. And at least you can tell them. Who held the rear? Who lit the fire? Who carried the oil jar into the flames? Who gave you his tag? They're dead. Somebody has to remember them. Taitu slowly unclenched his sword hand, sat quiet for a long time, then nodded. Right. I have to go back. I have to report every single name. If the merit office skips even one, I'll fight them with my bare hands. Good. But maybe don't fight anyone right now. I glanced at his condition. Right now you might not even be able to beat me. And look at me. He blinked. Looked me up and down, my half-dead wreck of a body. His mouth twitched. Brother Wong, that's hurtful. Truth usually is. He tried to laugh, but his wounds made him gasp instead. You are genuinely annoying. Get in line. Huyengu felt the same way about 10 minutes ago. He stared at me. I think he realized then that the reason I'd survived wasn't just my archery. It was partly because my enemies couldn't bring themselves to let me die quickly. They all wanted to make me suffer first, and that kept giving me time. We didn't rest long. Wolf howls drifted through the wind behind us, not heading straight at us, but not far either. Taitu tried to stand. His leg buckled, and he nearly collapsed. I grabbed his arm. My own body swayed. We almost pulled each other into a snow ditch. He looked at the two of us, one man with a mangled arm and shattered armor, the other with knife wounds everywhere and half his eyebrows burned off. We look like refugees. I considered this. Refugees are richer than us. At least they're usually not being hunted by a tendon-changing warrior. He thought about it. Fair point. We walked. Talked in low voices about nothing important. Not because anything was funny. Because if we stopped talking, the tightness in our chests might snap something that wouldn't go back together. I wasn't afraid of pain. I was afraid of my brain going foggy, of my body deciding to lie down in the snow and sleep. That kind of sleep you don't wake up from. Taitu was the same. We were both running on fumes and willpower. After a while, he suddenly stopped, pressed his hand to his chest, pulled out a blood-frozen military tag. I didn't reach for it. He stared at it. His voice was barely a whisper. The last kid, Zhao Xiaoman, 17 when he joined the suicide squad. Always said he didn't eat much. Always first in line for seconds. I used to make fun of his name. Xiaoman means little full, and I'd say his bowl was never full. He tried to smile. Couldn't make it happen. I was quiet for a moment. Then I asked, do you remember the other names? He looked up, eyes full of broken blood vessels. Every one. Who charged the east warehouse first? Who rolled into the fodder yard holding an oil jar? Who stayed behind on the slope? Who fell last? I remember all of them. Then you really can't die? I said. You die, and all that's left of them is one line. Suicide squad, total loss. He tucked the tag back against his chest. Slowly, carefully, like he was pressing 50 lives back into his body. Don't worry. I'll crawl back to Juma Pass if I have to. I looked at his bleeding leg. Crawling's fine. Just don't crawl too slow. The barbarians might not appreciate your determination. He opened his mouth to curse at me. Then a bone whistle shrieked somewhere in the distance behind us. We both froze at the bone whistle sound. I listened. Coming from behind and to the side. Wolves too. Taitu gripped his sword. How many? 7 or 8 white wolf guard. 1 snow wolf. Huyengu? I shook my head. Don't hear his footsteps. The avalanche and the fire probably held him up. Taitu let out half a breath of relief. But these 7 or 8, I added, are still enough to mince us into dumpling filling. He sucked that half-breath right back in. Could you maybe, just once, not be so honest? No. Better to know the score before you die. Ahead of us was a narrow mountain path. Snow and rocks piled on both sides, only wide enough for 2 men to walk shoulder to shoulder. I scanned it instantly. Here, this is where we fight. Taitu understood. Open ground meant certain death. A choke point gave us a chance. How? He asked. I looked at my iron chain. No arrows, no crossbow. Can't shoot from distance. We'll have to play dirty. You're good at that. I nodded seriously. When you're poor, you need at least one talent. I looped one end of the chain around a jutting rock and held the other end, letting it lie buried under the snow across the path. Invisible unless you knew where to look. Tripping the wolf, Taitu asked. Wolves jump too high for a simple tripwire. When it leaps, I pull the chain. You cut. Taitu flexed his wrist, wincing. I've got maybe 3 good swings left in me. He thought about it. If I'm allowed to collapse afterward, 5. Then aim carefully. He shot back. You'd better pull accurately too. If I miss the pull, only you die. If you miss the cut, we both die. His face darkened. What kind of thing is that to say? Pre-battle encouragement. He almost laughed despite himself. We went quiet. The wolf came first. Armored. fast, eyes locked on the blood leaking from my left arm. It charged down the narrow path like a gray missile. Neither of us moved. 2 frozen stones in the blizzard. 10 paces. 8. 5. It launched itself, rear legs exploding with power. Now, I yanked the chain with both hands. It snapped taut right across the wolf's chest and forelegs mid-leap. The beast's momentum carried it straight into the rock wall beside the path. Crash. Iron armor on stone. Hitaitu roared and swung. First cut. Not the neck. Too much armor there. He went for the gap at the shoulder joint. Blood sprayed. The wolf screamed and thrashed, trying to rise. I was already on it. My stolen knife drove upward through the side of its open jaw. Hitaitu's second swing came down on its half-broken neck. Crack. The massive body convulsed and went still. The wolf corpse collapsed right in the middle of the narrow path, blocking it like a barricade. The white wolf guard behind it stumbled to a halt. The passage was too tight to charge past a dead, armored wolf. Good, Hitaitu gasped. Then his face went white. Those 2 swings had torn something inside him. I was worse. Pulling the chain had ripped my left arm wound open again. Blood was running freely down my wrist. Don't celebrate. We're not done. The first white wolf guard soldier climbed over the wolf corpse. Shield up, curved sword hidden behind it. Cautious. I hated these people. Any normal soldier would have charged in screaming, avenged the wolf, and gotten themselves killed. These guys never stopped being professional. Steady. Careful. Exhausting to fight. His foot caught my chain under the snow. I pulled. He stumbled. Hitaitu brought down swing number 3. It hit the shield, didn't break through, but knocked the man back half a step. I slipped around the shield edge and drove my knife into his knee. He dropped. Hitaitu's 4th swing found the gap in his neck armor. Head rolled into the snow. Hitaitu swayed. Almost fell. That's 4. I'm counting, he growled. The second soldier was smarter. He slashed the chain first. Clang, sending it bouncing, nearly tearing it from my numb fingers. Then his sword came straight at my face. I blocked with my bow. The impact rattled my skeleton. Chest felt like it was tearing apart inside. Hitaitu burned his 5th swing, not on the soldier, but on the back of the man's sword blade, knocking it sideways. I crashed into the man's body, driving my knife up under his ribs through an armor gap. He kicked me away. I rolled across the snow, blood at my mouth again. But the knife wound slowed him, and the remaining soldiers behind saw the pile of bodies. 1 wolf, 2 elite warriors, clogging the narrow path. They finally backed off to regroup and try to flank around. Time to go, I said. Hitaitu clenched his jaw. I can still. No, you can't. 1 more swing, and I'll have to carry you. And right now I can't carry anyone. He was quiet for a second. Go. We ran. If you can call it running. 2 broken sacks propping each other up, stumbling through the snow. Hitaitu panted. You said I could only manage 5 swings, and the evidence proves you right. The 5th one was saving your life, which is why I acknowledge you're useful. He looked like he wanted to spit blood at me from pure irritation. Brother Wong. Yeah? When we get back to Juma Pass, I'm going to hit you. Sure. Assuming you can still stand, he went silent. I think he decided talking to me was literally costing him blood he couldn't spare. The pursuers were held up by the wolf corpse and the narrow pass. We gained some distance. Then, through the blinding snow, I saw something. A tiny flicker of light. Not the grain depot fire behind us. Not barbarian torches. It was a fire pit. On a watchtower. One of Juma Pass's outer sentry stations. Small. Barely visible. The wind almost blew it out as I watched. But at that moment, that little orange that was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Hitaitu spotted it too. His knees buckled. We made it. We actually made it. I didn't smile. I just kept walking, leaning on my bow, putting 1 foot ahead of the other. When we were a few dozen paces from the tower, a voice barked down through the storm. Who goes there? Hitaitu opened his mouth to shout our identity. All that came out was a spray of blood. I sighed. Even at the finish line, it was still on me. I dug up the last scrap of energy in my body and yelled, Marksman Battalion, Wang Qing. Suicide Squad Commander, Hitaitu. Grain depot destroyed. Returning to camp. Silence up above. Then a head popped over the railing. The grain burning squad? You're from the burning squad. Where are the others? Hitaitu's head dropped. He said nothing. I was quiet for a moment too. Then, slowly, the others stayed behind. Not, fell behind. stayed. The sentry's face changed completely. He spun around screaming, "Open the gate. Open it now. The burning squad is back." Two alive, the wooden barricade swung open. Soldiers rushed out and caught us. Taitu collapsed the instant someone took his weight, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. He'd been holding himself up on nothing but willpower, and the moment he was safe, his body quit. I wasn't much better. I handed my steel bow to the nearest soldier. "Hold this." He took it automatically. "Don't lose it," I added. "It's expensive." The man stared at me, bleeding from everywhere, half my armor gone, barely conscious, and worrying about my bow. I caught his look and managed a weak grin. "Can't help it. I've been poor." My vision started going dark around the edges. Taitu leaned against the gate, staring north at the sky. The grain depot was still burning. The glow painted the clouds red even through the blizzard. Still burning. Too big to put out. He reached into his coat and pulled out the blood-frozen military tag. Just one. Zhao Xiaoman's. He squeezed it in his fist until his knuckles went white. "Write it down," he said, voice barely there. "Zhao Xiaoman. And the other 48 brothers from the suicide squad. I'll recite every name. Not one gets left out." The soldiers around us stared at the single tag in his hand. Their throats locked up. Then, from where I was slumped against a post, I spoke up. Half my words were slurred. "One more thing." Everyone looked at me. I took a slow breath. The grain burned. "Mission complete." I paused. "The military merit. Don't forget to log it." The heavy mood in the air lurched sideways, like someone had shoved it off balance. Taiatu's red eyes snapped to me. "You really aren't human." I kept my eyes closed. The tiniest pull at the corner of my mouth. People can die, but the books have to be right. Then the darkness finally won. I passed out cold. After I said, "The books have to be right," my body finally gave out. I tipped sideways and 2 soldiers caught me before I hit the ground. I must have looked terrible. Black soot, blood, frozen snow all caked together on my face. Left arm half wrapped in shredded armor with blood frozen into a dark red crust. Chest armor slashed to ribbons. A young guard looked at me nervously. "Is he still alive?" An older soldier checked my breathing. "Shallow, but there. Alive. Stop gawking. Get the medic. Get a stretcher. Boil water. Move faster or the live one becomes a dead one." The alarm gongs rang 3 times from the watchtower. Not enemy attack, but a night return signal. Soldiers with torches came running from every direction. They saw us first. Then they saw the fire on the northern horizon. Even through the blizzard, the grain depot was still burning furiously. Red light rolled up from beneath the clouds. Black smoke twisted through the sky like a giant snake. The wind carried the smell of burned grain, scorched animal hides, and fire oil. The guards stood in the snow, speechless. They'd seen plenty of death at Juma Pass. But seeing the barbarian grain depot lit up like that, first time for everyone. Someone whispered, "It really burned." Nobody answered. They all knew. A fire that big meant the warehouses had been gutted completely. Taitu sat against the wooden fence, breathing like every gasp had a knife in it. But he wouldn't let anyone move him first. He pulled out the blood-frozen military tag from his coat. "Zhao Xiaoman's. Get me the squad roster," he said, voice wrecked. "Commander, the roster's at the merit office. Get treated first. I know where the roster is. I need to verify the dead." 50 went out. 2 came back. 48 brothers from the suicide squad, all gone. Who burned which warehouse? Who held the rear? Who carried the oil jars? Who gets the merit? Whose family gets the death payment? It all has to be written down properly. He looked at the tag in his palm. They were death soldiers, not nameless firewood. Nobody rushed him after that. A clerk came with a register and a charcoal pen, kneeling by the fire pit with numb fingers. The register already had all 50 names from before we'd left. Taitu pointed at them one by one. "Zhao Xiaoman. Covered our retreat. Arrow in the chest. Gave me his tag. Recorded as rearguard merit. Chun Lujing. Biggest bragger in camp. Said he'd killed 3 barbarians with 1 swing when he was young." Everyone thought he was lying. He was the first man to grab a fire oil jar and charge the east warehouse. Turned out the old man wasn't lying after all. Li Dagwai, bad leg, got slashed during the central warehouse charge, but still held the doorway against 2 grain guard elites. Sun Goshing hated the cold, complained every night watch. When the fodder yard caught fire, He was already burning head to toe and still tackled a barbarian into the hay pile, name after name. How they fought. How they died. The soldiers listening around us went red-eyed and quiet. Hitaidu didn't stop. He was afraid if he paused, he'd never finish. These weren't glamorous men. They slacked off, fought over food, cursed the weather, cheated at dice. But when the fire started and the blades came down, not one of them shrank back. The clerk's fingers were frozen stiff, but he kept writing. He knew he wasn't recording merit entries. He was writing down the last trace these men would leave in the world. When Hitaidu finished the last name, he sagged against the fence like someone had pulled his spine out. I'll check it again later. Every family's death payment, every man's merit. Nothing gets skipped. The clerk nodded hard. Nothing. The news rippled through Juma Pass like a stone dropped in water. The night patrol saw the fire in the north and sent runners. The marksman battalion boys stumbled out of their tents in the cold, staring at the red sky. It really burned? Nobody answered right away. They just looked. After a long while, someone said quietly, "Burned that bad. The barbarians can't save it. How many came back?" 2. Silence. Wang Qing and Hitaidu from the suicide squad. Both badly wounded. Sent to the medical tent. Old Hay came out last, belt still untied, and asked the question everyone was thinking. That kid Wang Qing is really alive. Alive. Unconscious, but breathing. Old Hay let out a breath, then stared north at the burning sky for a long time. That boy usually counts his coins tighter than the merit office. But this time he went and bet his life. The one-eyed officer arrived in full armor. Heard the report. Looked at the fire, then toward the medical tent. Send 2 men to stand guard at the medical tent. When Wang Qing wakes up, don't let the merit office people pester him with questions. Let him breathe first. Old Hay grinned. Sir, you yell at him all day, but you actually care. The officer glared with his single eye. One more word, and I'll show you how much I care. Old Hay shut up instantly. The officer looked north one more time. That fire burned well. He said it quietly, but everyone heard. He wasn't just praising me or Hitaidu. He was saying those 48 men who didn't come back, their deaths carried weight. The supply office was already recalculating. If the barbarian grain depot was gone, their front lines would be disrupted for at least 3 days. 3 days to repair our broken crossbow carriages, restock arrows, let the wounded recover. Time. The thing Juma Pass needed most. The merit office pulled our file. The chief clerk saw my name and his eyebrow twitched. Him again, his assistant whispered. Sir, if this 500 points goes through, he'll have enough for the treading snow technique. The clerk closed the file. If he earned it, he gets it. Merit office follows rules. What living men fight to earn doesn't get held back. What dead men paid for with their lives doesn't get delayed. I woke up the next afternoon. The medical tent smelled like herbs and old blood. First thing I saw was the dark ceiling beams. First thing I felt was pain everywhere. Left arm, chest, hands, back. All competing to see which hurt worst. Very democratic of them. I tried to move. Immediately regretted it. HSSS. The old medic didn't even look up. Awake? Then don't move. Wolf bite, blade trauma, split knuckles, chest bruising. You dragged this life back yourself. Guess I'm talented at finding things to keep. He paused, looked at me. Still cracking jokes. You'll live. Across the tent, Hitaidu was lying on another wooden cot. Half an eyebrow missing, bandages everywhere. His usually fierce face looked almost comical with the burned-off brow. I looked at him. Your eyebrow's gone. His face darkened. I know. It's distinctive. He took a very deep breath. If his body weren't wrecked, I think he would have gotten up and punched me. Then the tent flap opened. 2 clerks from the merit office walked in with a file. Grain burning results confirmed. Main warehouse, central warehouse, east warehouse, and fodder yard. All destroyed. 50-man squad. 2 returned. Wang Qing and Hitaidu, 500 merit points each. 48 deceased suicide squad members. Full death benefits. Compensation to be distributed to their families. When they said, 48, full benefits, Hitaidu stopped trying to sit up. He looked at Zhao Xiaoman's tag in his palm. His throat moved. Their names, all verified against the departure roster. Your supplementary combat records from last night have been entered. Nothing's missing. Hitaidu closed his eyes. Good. I leaned against the headboard. When I heard 500 merit points, I perked up noticeably. 500. This trip wasn't wasted. These wounds weren't for nothing. 500 points meant treading snow without trace was finally within reach. Hitaitu asked hoarsely, "Can my 500 get me promoted to full centurion?" The clerk nodded. "You were a trial centurion. With this merit, once you've recovered, you'll be confirmed as a full centurion." Hitaitu went quiet. Then he laughed softly. A bitter laugh. Full centurion. That rank cost a lot. Nobody said anything. Of course it was expensive. 48 lives expensive. After a moment, I said, "Expensive is better. Cheap things don't get valued." Hitaitu looked at me. This time he didn't call me annoying. He just tucked the tag back against his chest and said quietly, "From now on, first rule when I lead soldiers. No merit gets left unrecorded." "What's the second rule?" He looked at me. "Stay far away from you." I nodded. "Smart." He almost laughed despite himself. The merit clerks told me my 500 points were logged, and that treading snow without trace was available for exchange once I could walk. Finally, the old medic came over with a bowl of medicine, black, thick, and smelling like something that died twice. Done talking about merit, I had the bowl. "Can merit points pay for medicine?" "No." He shoved the bowl at me. Hitaitu snorted with laughter from his cot, until the medic produced a second bowl and set it in front of him. "Yours too." His smile froze. I took a sip, bitter enough to make my face cramp. Suffering together, I offered. "Could you maybe say 2 fewer words before you die?" He shot back. I swallowed another mouthful and waited until the bitterness faded. Even without talking, "It's still bitter." He had nothing to say to that. After the clerks left, the tent went quiet. Wind still howling outside. The fire in the north had faded, but what that fire had done was just beginning to take effect. Barbarian grain supply crippled. Juma Pass bought precious time. The suicide squad lost 48 men. Hitaitu would become a real centurion. And I finally had enough points for the movement technique I'd been chasing since I first saw it in the arsenal. All that blood had been written into the ledgers at last. I finished the medicine, leaned back, and closed my eyes. Everything still hurt. Chest still tight. But the weight I'd been carrying in my gut had finally lifted. "When I heal up," I murmured, barely audible, "first thing, go trade for treading snow." Hitaitu heard me from across the tent. "You really do think about techniques in your sleep." I kept my eyes shut. I've been on the losing end of being too slow. I'm scared of it now. He thought about last night. The two of us stumbling through the snow like stray dogs while Huyin Gu's wolves closed in, and couldn't argue. The fire pit crackled softly in the tent. One man clutching a dead soldier's tag, the other dreaming about a technique manual. Both wrapped in bandages and bitter medicine, we finally drifted off to sleep. On the 5th day, they finally let me get out of bed. The old military doctor didn't sugarcoat it. He said I could walk, but that didn't mean I could train. My left arm where the wolf bit me still hadn't closed up. The bruising on my chest hadn't faded. The skin on my palm had just started to scab over. If I forced it now, the wounds could tear open. Or worse, I could end up with permanent damage to my muscles. I didn't argue. Days of bitter medicine and painful bandage changes had made me honest. Pain teaches you faster than any lecture. Every time that old doctor peeled off the wrappings and cleaned my wounds, I learned exactly how many pieces of meat I was made of. I can push myself hard when I need to, but I don't like losing for nothing. Wrecking my body just to look hardworking. That's the worst trade you can make. So I only did one thing. I went to the armory, not to train, to exchange my military merit for a movement technique. One eye took me there himself. Old Hay tagged along, but kept quiet for once. Things had changed around Juma Pass in the past few days. The northern barbarians had stopped their heavy attacks. The war drums on the walls were quieter now. Damaged crossbow carts were being hauled down for repairs. The supply office was recounting arrows and fire oil. The grain stores hadn't grown any bigger. Rations were still thin, dry biscuits still split in half. But at least the garrison wasn't fighting and repairing and moving wounded all at the same time. That fire we set gave the pass some breathing room. Maybe 3 to 5 days. Maybe 7 or 8. But on a battlefield, that's enough time to fix crossbow carts, restock arrows, and let a round of wounded soldiers pull through. Enough for a fortress that was about to break to straighten its back one more time. But that breathing room cost a lot. I passed the merit office on the way. Hitaitu was sitting by the door, still bandaged up, half an eyebrow burned off. In front of him was the death roster for our raid squad. 48 names. Every single one had their cause of death and contribution recorded. Who charged the granary, who carried the fire oil, who held the rear, who died in the flames, who fell in the snow. He wasn't doing this for show. He was doing it so the merit and the death payments would actually reach the right families. The worst thing in the army is when someone's death gets reduced to a few words, such and such squad, casualties, several. If that's all that's left, the living forget in a few months, and the families back home get their compensation delayed, docked, or lost in the shuffle. Hitaitu had been dragging his wounded body around for days just to make sure those 48 men didn't become several. I stopped for a moment. I didn't go over to bother him. When I glanced that way too, but said nothing. Hitaitu's rank as a proper centurion wasn't just a title anymore. It was a burden pressed down by 48 lives. I kept walking. Along the way, soldiers looked at me differently than before. It used to be curiosity, the fierce newcomer from the archery camp, the kid whose merit was climbing fast. Now their eyes held something quieter. Respect. Not because I burned the granary alone, but because I came back alive from that fire. I didn't let it go to my head. My body still hurt. Pain keeps you clear. I knew better than anyone. That night wasn't about me alone. I drew the White Wolf guards away, killed sentries, scattered the wolf pens, held off Huyen-gu, and used my last heavy arrows to push the fire past the point of no return. But without Hitaitu and those 48 men charging in with barrels of fierce fire oil, all my arrows would have only killed people, not burned grain. You have to keep that account straight. You can't count other people's lives as your own glory. The armory was simple. Thick wooden door, iron lock, 2 guards. Inside, it was sorted into weapons, armor, pills, and techniques. No incense altars, no ancestor portraits, no mystical ceremonies. Just military merit. Enough, and you trade. Not enough, you leave. I like that. Clean. Clear. The armory clerk found my name quickly. 500 merit points, deducted. 1 copy of Treading Snow Without Trace, issued. The techniques weren't unique originals. Those stayed locked in the back vault. What soldiers got were transcribed copies, with rules against sharing or destroying them. What I'd been worried about was never that someone else would take the last copy. I'd been worried my merit wouldn't be recorded and the armory wouldn't honor it. Now the clerk stamped the ledger, the points came off, and the technique was officially mine. He handed me a thin gray booklet. For characters on the cover. It wasn't thick. The paper wasn't fancy. But when I took it, my fingers tightened without thinking. This thin little book carried too much weight. Arrows through a sea of fire. Wolves in the snow forest. Huyen Gooseblade. And 48 men who never came back. When I told me the technique wasn't just about speed. First you learn to absorb impact. Then you learn to shift your steps. Then you learn to use momentum. And he made it clear. Until my wounds healed, I could read it, but I was not allowed to practice. I agreed. I meant it this time. The more important this technique was, the less I could afford to rush it. I opened the first page. No fancy talk. Straight to the point. Lightness doesn't come from thin air. Speed doesn't come from wild stepping. To tread snow without trace, first learn to release force. 1 step lands. Force enters the snow but doesn't sink. 1 step borrows. The body follows the wind but doesn't lose balance. Just reading those few lines, my mind went back to that night in the snow forest. The rocky ditches, the slopes, the deep snow, the fallen trees, the wolf claws, the blade light. I survived that night on experience, calm thinking, terrain, and a bit of luck. But luck doesn't last forever. If I'd had this technique then, I might not have beaten Huyen-gu, but I wouldn't have been chased so desperately. I wouldn't have had to roll through snow ditches and crash into rocks and trade wounds just for 1 more breath of distance. My panel appeared. It recognized the technique and asked if I wanted to add it. I accepted. Proficiency, beginner, 0 out of 100. That was fine. Starting from 0 has never scared me. As long as the panel records it, and I'm still alive, the rest is just grinding. Other people worry about talent, about wrong turns, about training for weeks with nothing to show. I don't worry about those things. I only worry about 2 things, not being alive to train and not having the resources to train. The first one, I've managed for now. The second, I still need to earn. The armory clerk reminded me that light body techniques are hardest on the leg tendons and the waist. Training with unhealed wounds would cause worse damage than a knife cut. I told him I'd study it first. He nodded and said just don't use my feet yet. Practical advice. More useful than any martial arts philosophy. I didn't stay long. Standing too much already made my chest feel tight. Outside, the wind and snow had let up a little. Gray-white sky. Soldiers still patching the wall. Crossbow carts being pushed back up. Wounded being carried into the medical camp. Someone sweeping frozen blood off the ground. Someone stacking broken shields for the craftsmen to fix. Juma Pass hadn't gotten easy because of our raid. It had just caught one breath out from under the barbarians' weight. After that breath, it still had to hold. I looked north. The snow stretched endlessly. The fire at the granary had gone out. But I knew the barbarians wouldn't forget what happened. Huyengu wouldn't either. He didn't know my name yet. That night, he only remembered the Daxiao archer. But that wouldn't stay hidden for long. A whole granary burned. White wolf guards killed and wounded. They'd investigate. My name would reach Huyengu sooner or later. And next time, the killing would be worse. One eye asked me if I was afraid. I said yes. Calmly. No tough act. No pretending. An enemy at the mid-stage of tendon transformation, a white wolf guard commander, heavy blade. And he wasn't stupid either. It would be strange not to be afraid. But I told him, afraid, so I need to train. Can't beat him now, so stay alive first. Stay alive until I can beat him, then settle the score. He was quiet for a moment, then said to remember that. Don't let hatred pull you along. On the battlefield, the first to die usually aren't the weak, they're the reckless. I knew he was right. I'd already tested Huyengu's blade that night. Head-on, I wasn't enough yet. At the peak of skin tempering, I was strong against regular soldiers and could hold my own against White Wolf Guard elites. But against a mid-tendon transformation barbarian commander, the gap was still clear. I could survive through archery, terrain, and planning. But surviving isn't winning. You can't lie to yourself about martial arts. Fool others, maybe you win for a while. Fool yourself, and you die fast. On the way back, I passed the merit office again. Hitaitu was gone. A few soldiers were sorting through the dead men's belongings. Worn clothes, wooden name tags, unsent letters home, a few copper coins saved up. All of it would be sent back according to the roster, delivered to their families. Maybe some families would cry. Maybe some families had no one left to cry. Every year the army sends out packages like these. Light little bundles holding everything a person had left. I watched for a while and said nothing. The booklet in my arms suddenly felt heavier. This technique wasn't an ending. It was a chance to survive next time. And it was capital, to keep settling accounts for myself and for the men who died. Back at the medical camp, the old doctor spotted the booklet right away. He asked if I got it. I said yes. He asked if I practiced. I said no. He stared at me for a few breaths, decided I wasn't lying, and snorted. At least you still want to live. The medicine was the same as always. A black, bitter bowl you could smell from across the tent. I took it and drank it in one go. Bitter enough to make my temples twitch. But I didn't complain. It's bitter. It works. It makes the wounds heal faster. Faster healing means earlier training. That math is simple too. At night, the medical camp grew quiet. Hitaitu was already asleep, Zhao Xiaoman's military tag still in his hand. I leaned against the headboard and opened, treading snow without trace. I didn't circulate any energy. I didn't get up. I just read, word by word, line by line. First pass for the footwork. Second pass for absorbing force. Third pass for how to gather the blood and energy at the waist without letting the feet go stiff. I read it again and again. The panel didn't move at all. That was normal. Proficiency doesn't come from reading. Without standing up, without moving, without practicing step by step, the panel won't give you anything for free. But I still read carefully. The lamp was dim. Wind and snow outside were fading. The medical tent smelled of medicine, and once in a while you'd hear a wounded soldier groan as he turned over. I went page by page, and my mind grew quieter and quieter. Can't practice? Then read first. Can't move? Then memorize first. Break down every line of instruction. Walk through every footwork pattern in my head. When the wounds heal, I'll grind it out with my body, one step at a time. That's my path. Others rely on talent, on masters, on pills, on sudden breakthroughs. I rely on staying alive, on grinding bit by bit, on squeezing every usable moment dry. Out in the northern snow, Huyengu will come again sooner or later. The White Wolf Guards won't let this go. The war at Juma Pass is far from over. But I'm not in a rush right now. I turned the next page, and only one thought remained. First, heal. Then, train my legs. Next time I go into that snow forest, I don't want to survive by rolling through the dirt anymore. I want to walk on the snow, retreat on the snow, and on that snow, kill my way back. On the 9th day, the old military doctor unwrapped the last layer of bandage from my left arm. He stared at the wolf bite for a long time. The wound was still ugly, but the flesh had closed up. The swelling was gone, leaving only a ring of dark scar tissue. The split on my palm had sealed tight too. The bruise on my chest from Huyin Gu's blade still ached a little, but it no longer stopped me from channeling strength. He had me make a fist, raise my elbow, twist my waist. I did it all. My movements were still a bit tight, but nothing was stuck. The old doctor cursed under his breath. Freak. His young apprentice couldn't help asking if I was really healed. The doctor glared at him. A normal soldier hurt this bad would need a month before he could even stand. This one can draw a bow and practice footwork in 9 days. You tell me. I didn't say anything. I knew my fast recovery wasn't some miracle. The iron rhino body tempering method had forged my skin, muscles, and blood flow far beyond what a normal skin tempering cultivator had. That technique looked clumsy most of the time, but when it came to healing, a thick foundation showed its worth immediately. As long as the damage wasn't to my core, I'd bounce back faster than anyone. The old doctor packed up his medicine box and gave me one last warning. I could train, but I shouldn't treat myself like a chunk of iron. The wound had just closed. The muscles were still tender. Light body footwork was hardest on the leg tendons, the waist, and the flow of energy between them. Overdo it, and I'd never walk right again. I told him I'd start with the basics. He looked at me and said I'd better actually know what basics meant. I did. I'd memorized every line of Treading Snow Without Trace over the past few days. But just reading hadn't moved my proficiency at all. The system doesn't hand out progress for memorizing a book. Martial arts have to land on the body. You have to step, absorb force, channel energy, fall, make mistakes, and correct them. I left the medical camp and went straight to the western drill ground. Along the edge was a patch of unswept snow. Not deep, but enough for the first layer of training. The manual was clear about step 1. It wasn't about speed. It was about releasing force. When your foot hits the snow, you can't let the power slam straight down. The knee sinks but doesn't lock. The hip loosens but doesn't collapse. When the sole touches ground, the force has to spread outward from the edge of the foot, so your body weight doesn't punch straight into the snow. I stood at the edge of the snow and let out a slow breath. First step. The moment my foot touched the surface, years of habit tried to push my weight straight down. Normally that step would leave a deep print, but right at the instant before the force landed, a familiar correction rippled up through my leg. My knee was guided slightly lower. The stiffness in my hip was nudged loose. The outer edge of my foot kissed the snow first, and part of the downward force scattered outward. The snow still sank, but only half an inch. Proficiency +1. That's what the system is for. Not making me stronger by reading. But when I actually start training, it takes the things that only exist as words in a manual and calibrates them into my muscles and joints, one tiny adjustment at a time. I'll make mistakes, but every mistake gets corrected. Every correction adds a little. Second step. I tried to copy the feeling from the first one on my own. My hip was still a bit stiff. The system's feedback came immediately. A faint tingling spread from my waist, loosening that dead tension by half a degree. +1. Third step. +1. Fourth step. I landed too heavy. My ankle dipped and my body tilted. The system correction hit hard. Knee, ankle, and hip all tingled at once, dragging my center of gravity back from the wrong angle. I steadied myself. Sweat on my forehead. +2. I didn't speed up. I went slower and slower. Walked from one end of the snow to the other and back again. Every step was a check. Did my toes rush forward? Did my heel slam? Was my hip stiff? Was my knee locked? It didn't look impressive. It probably looked stupid. But after half an hour, the footprints in the snow were visibly shallower. The first set was deep and heavy, like any ordinary soldier's. The later ones, though still visible, were at least 30% lighter. One eye stood at the edge of the drill ground, watched for a long time, and finally said 2 words. It works. Those 2 words meant more than any praise. On a battlefield, working is enough. I kept training. By late morning, my panel read, Treading Snow Without Trace. Not yet learned. 39 out of 100. Still not past the entry threshold. But it wasn't words on paper anymore. It was skill growing under my feet. That's when the urgent report came from the Northwest Outpost. A patrol squad hadn't returned. Half an hour later, one of the patrol soldiers made it back to the outer checkpoint, wounded. He was clear about what happened. They were ambushed on the old Northwest Forest Road. White Wolf Guard, a small team, but with snow wolves. Their goal wasn't to attack the pass. They wanted prisoners. They were trying to figure out the rotation schedule of our outer patrols, and they wanted to grab an archer from the sharpshooter camp to find out who the Dachau bowman was on the night of the granary fire. This was exactly what the White Wolf Guards would do. Their frontal assault was stalled after losing the grain, so they shifted to harassing our outer lines, grabbing patrols, mapping our defenses, and hunting for payback against the sharpshooter camp. One Eye immediately picked a team. Old Hay leading. 2 sharpshooter archers, for sword and shield soldiers, 1 veteran scout. I was on the list. One Eye looked at me. You just healed. I slung the iron core bow onto my back. I can draw. Don't chase deep. Understood. This wasn't recklessness. I knew the old Northwest Forest Road. I knew snow wolf behavior. And more importantly, I'd just started getting a feel for treading snow without trace. I needed to know how much this footwork could actually do in a real snow forest. Half an hour later, we were on the old forest road. Wind and snow pressed the treetops low. Frost-cracked trees leaned into the snow. Brush lay flat under white cover. The old path showed nothing but a few snapped dead branches. The veteran scout crouched by a patch of disturbed snow. Here, drag marks in the snow. Blood too. The patrol hadn't been killed on the spot. At least one person had been dragged away. I read the tracks. Boot prints, shallow, evenly spaced. Wolf claw prints flanking both sides, meaning the wolves weren't attacking wildly, but moving in coordinated formation under a wolf handler's control. This White Wolf Guard team had a clear objective: grab someone and pull out. Not a suicide mission. I pointed to a narrow slope on the north side of the trail. They won't take the main road. Carrying a prisoner and wounded, with wolves, the main road is too easy to chase down. They'll cut along the slope and circle back north. The scout nodded. Move. The team split. 2 sword and shield soldiers pushed forward along the old road, making noise like a frontal pursuit. Old Hay and 1 archer took the high ground on the right. I went with the scout around the slope side. The slope was all loose rock and packed snow. Normally, I'd leave uneven, noisy footprints here. This time I used treading snow without trace. Foot on the snow, knees sinking, hip loose, force spreading from the outer edge of my soul. +1. 1 step, and my print was lighter. Second step hit frozen rock under the snow. The surface slipped and my ankle almost twisted. The system corrected instantly, pulling my center of gravity back inward. I shifted my step smoothly. Didn't kick a single stone loose. +2. The scout glanced back at me, surprise in his eyes. But nobody spoke. There was movement ahead. A wolf sniffing low, and the muffled groan of someone with a gag in their mouth. I raised my hand. Everyone stopped. Through the gaps in the brush, I saw them. 6 White Wolf Guards. 1 armored snow wolf. One of them had a bone whistle at his waist, the wolf handler. 2 short-bow archers in the back. 2 shield-carrying barbarian soldiers guarding the center. The last one was dragging a Dachau patrol soldier. The prisoner's face was covered in blood, bound with beast sinew, mouth stuffed with cloth, 1 leg slashed open, but still struggling. They hadn't killed him. They wanted him alive. My eyes went cold. On a battlefield, the first arrow matters most. I aimed straight at the wolf handler. If he didn't die, the snow wolf would lock onto our scent, and if we had to retreat, the trouble would never end. I drew the iron core bow. My palm was still a little tight, but it wouldn't affect this shot. I didn't rush the release. Their formation was solid. Shields on the sides, short bows in the back, wolf up front, handler in the center. If the first arrow missed or didn't kill the handler instantly, and the bone whistle directed the wolf, it would charge straight at our hiding spot. The ambush would turn into a brawl. I watched the handler's hands. One gripped the beast's sinew leash. The other hung at his side, half a foot from the bone whistle. Wind swept across the treetops. Brush swayed gently. The instant his fingers rose toward the whistle, I released. The bowstring barely trembled. No twang. No whistle of air. The heavy arrow slipped through the wind and snow like a dark shadow, silent, threading between 2 bushes. The handler never heard it. He just felt a sudden coolness at his throat. Next instant, the arrowhead punched out through the back of his neck. A line of blood sprayed across the snow. The bone whistle never reached his lips. He fell backward. First arrow cut the wolf's leash. The snow wolf jerked its head up. With the leash slack and no handler, the killing instinct in its eyes went wild. It growled deep in its throat. But without the whistle's command, it didn't charge the right direction. It just turned toward the blood and the arrow's origin on instinct. That half-breath was enough. I didn't stay where I was. The moment the arrow left, I shifted my feet. Knee down, hip loose, outer edge of my sole gliding across the snow. Treading snow without trace worked on the slope. My whole body slid sideways about 5 feet, leaving only faint marks in the snow. +3. Almost at the same instant, 2 short arrows thudded into exactly where I'd been hiding. The White Wolf Guard archers were fast, but all they hit was empty snow behind a bush. My second arrow was already knocked. This time I targeted the left short-bow archer. He'd just realized no one was there and was swinging his bow to search when his chest jolted. My arrow came low along the ground, still silent, just a dark line through the wind and snow. It punched through a gap in his chest armor and pinned him back against a tree trunk. Second arrow cut their ranged attack. From the high ground on the right, Old Hay and the other sharpshooter fired together. Arrows aimed at the other short-bow archer and the legs of a shield soldier. The sword and shield soldiers charged out from the main road, shields locked, sabers hidden behind them, forcing the remaining White Wolf Guards to tighten their formation. The captured Daxia soldier thrashed into chaos. The barbarian, dragging him, reacted fast, pulling the prisoner in front of his own body as a human shield to block arrows while retreating. I didn't fire blindly. I shifted 3 quick steps along the slope, sliding downhill. The snow here hid loose rocks underneath. One wrong move, and I'd make noise. The system's tingling correction ran through my ankle and hip, pulling my drifting weight back on track. I circled to the side. The angle opened. The prisoner was no longer blocking my line. Third arrow, silent off the string. It punched through the dragging barbarian's right leg. He screamed and dropped to his knees. The bound patrol soldier rolled free. Old Hay followed up immediately. 1 arrow straight through the barbarian's neck. +2. The snow wolf finally locked onto my position. It snarled and lunged up the slope. Without the handler, it was still fast, but it had lost its coordination and timing. I didn't rush to kill it. On a battlefield, you kill the ones who can signal, shoot, and command first. An animal, no matter how fierce, is still just an animal. I spotted 1 White Wolf Guard reaching for a bone whistle at his waist, a backup signaler. Fourth arrow, still silent. The man had just pulled the whistle free when the arrow punched through his wrist, pinning the whistle and half his hand to a tree trunk. He screamed. The sword and shield soldiers rushed in and took him down. The wolf lunged close. I shifted 1 step, didn't retreat hard, just borrowed the slope's angle and slid half a step downward. Half a step wasn't much, but it was just enough to throw the wolf's leap off course. In the same motion, I raised my bow and put an arrow into the gap between the armor plates on its hind leg. The wolf howled, its charge twisting sideways. 2 sword and shield soldiers slammed in, shields pinning its head, long blades stabbing through its belly from the side. The wolf rolled over in the snow, blood staining the slope. +4. The last 2 White Wolf Guards saw it was over and bolted in opposite directions. They were well trained. Handler dead, archers dead, signaler crippled, wolf down. They knew the mission was finished. Staying to fight was pointless. Getting the information back was what mattered. I didn't chase the one on the left. Old Hay had that side covered. I went after the one on the right. He was fast, running light on the snow, clearly a veteran scout. I pushed treading snow without trace, cutting along the slope at an angle. Foot on the snow, force spreading from the edge. I wasn't fast yet, but I was steady. No more sinking 1 step deep and the next shallow. No more letting the snow drag my speed down. The White Wolf Guard looked back, saw I was closer than he expected, and flung a short knife behind him. I let my feet slide, shifted my weight half a foot to the side. The knife scraped past my padded armor and sliced off a corner of cloth. Half a foot. Not much. But half a foot is life or death. +4. While sliding, I raised my bow. 5th arrow off the string. Silent. Precise. It buried itself in the man's lower back. He pitched forward, tumbled through the snow, and was pinned down by the sword and shield soldiers who caught up. Fight over. Wolf Handler, dead. Shortbow Archers, dead. Backup Signaler, crippled. Snow Wolf, killed. The runners, captured. There were no fancy moves in this ambush. Every arrow I shot landed where it needed to, on the target that most needed to die, be crippled, or be cut off. That's what a sharpshooter is supposed to do, not showing off. Just taking apart the enemy's eyes, claws, and escape routes, one arrow at a time. The blood smell in the snow forest hadn't faded yet. I didn't chase any further. The White Wolf Guard I'd shot through the back was already pinned down in the snow by the sword and shield soldiers, hands tied behind him, mouth stuffed with cloth. The Wolf Handler was dead. The Shortbow Archers were dead. The Signaler was crippled. The Snow Wolf lay at the bottom of the slope, belly split open by a long blade, its hot blood turning the nearby snow dark red. This fight was over. Going deeper into the forest would be chasing glory for nothing. The White Wolf Guards aren't bandits. If they were bold enough to grab patrols on the old Northwest Road near Juma Pass, there might be a backup team waiting nearby. I put away my bow and scanned the slope below, then checked both sides of the trail. No new footsteps in the wind and snow. No wolf howls answering back. Only then did I speak. Clear the area, get our man, head back to the pass immediately. Old Hay nodded. The sword and shield soldiers flipped over the White Wolf Guard corpses, kicked away their short knives, and cut their bowstrings. The veteran scout crouched down and searched them, taking only what was useful: bone whistles, short bows, short knives, beast sinew rope, and a few barbarian military tags. The rescued Dachau patrol soldier was leaning against a tree, face white as paper. His right leg had been slashed, his shoulder was clawed by a wolf, and his lips were purple from the cold. Old Hay untied his hands and feet and pulled the rag from his mouth. The man gasped for a long time before he could breathe properly. I crouched in front of him. "Can you talk?" He nodded, voice rough and raw. "Yes." "What did they ask you?" His eyes tightened. "How many soldiers are left in the pass? How many days the grain can last? How many wounded we have? Whether the crossbow carts on the west wall are broken? How many arrows, fire oil, and rolling logs we still have?" My expression darkened. It was all clear now. The barbarians weren't grabbing prisoners for some clever scheme. They just wanted to know what Juma Pass had left. How many troops? How much food? How many wounded? How damaged our siege equipment was? Whether we had enough arrows? This kind of intelligence was worth far more than killing a few patrol soldiers. Their granary had been burned and their frontal assault was stalled. But they weren't going to stop. If they figured out that Juma Pass was also close to breaking, the next wave would hit even harder. The patrol soldier gritted his teeth and continued. They also asked if any reinforcements arrived recently. Which section of wall had the most casualties? What time the night shift changes happen? He paused. I didn't tell them. After saying those 3 words, he seemed to deflate with relief, but also stared at me hard, like he was afraid I wouldn't believe him. I looked at him. This man had been captured by White Wolf Guards, beaten and wounded. Holding out this long was already something. You came back alive. That's enough. I stood up and looked at the veteran scout. Interrogate the prisoner. The scout nodded. The captured White Wolf Guard was dragged over. His right leg had an arrow through it. His face was gray. His mouth was still gagged, but his eyes were still fierce. The scouts searched him thoroughly: boots, belt, wrist guards, braids, checking for hidden knives, needles, or poisoned bone chips. Only after confirming he was clean did they pull the cloth from his mouth. The interrogation was fast. The scout spoke the barbarian language. His questions were short and precise. Unit number, mission, any backup nearby, what they planned to do next. The White Wolf Guard refused to talk at first. The scout didn't waste words. He just pressed down on the man's wounded leg. The prisoner's face twisted instantly, and a choked growl came from his throat. A moment later, he started talking. They'd been ordered to grab prisoners around Juma Pass for the past few days. They didn't need to kill many, just bring back a few Dachau soldiers and get them to talk about troop strength, grain supply, wounded numbers, arrow stocks, crossbow carts, wall damage, and shift rotations. That alone would count as a success. I wasn't surprised. This was standard battlefield work. If the barbarians wanted to take Juma Pass, they needed to know how long it could hold. And if we wanted to defend it, we couldn't let that information leak. Then the prisoner gave up something bigger. There was another small team to the northwest. They were watching our supply transport routes. The barbarians had heard that several crossbow carts on the west wall still weren't fully repaired, and that arrows and winch mechanisms were going to be moved from the rear camp soon. If they could intercept that shipment, the west wall would be under much more pressure during the next assault. Old Hay's face went dark. The arrow transport route. I checked the sky. We head back now. Old Hay asked. Not going after that other team? I shook my head. No need. We rescued the patrol, captured a prisoner, got his confession. That's enough. If we push deeper and run into their support group, we'd just delay getting this information back, the veteran scout agreed. Get the intelligence back first. Military information is worth more than a few heads. We pulled out fast. The White Wolf Guard corpses were dealt with on the spot. We only cut ears and took their tags. Short bows, bone whistles, and knives came with us. The snow wolf carcass was too heavy to drag. The rescued patrol soldier was carried between two shield soldiers. The prisoner was regagged, tied tight, and personally guarded by the veteran scout. I walked at the rear of the group, iron core bow half raised the whole way. I didn't relax on the way back. This stretch of snow forest was perfect for ambushes. Even after winning one fight, you don't turn your back carelessly toward the barbarians. Nothing happened on the return. By the time we reached the outer checkpoint, the sky was already turning gray. The duty centurion in charge of this sector came quickly. He wasn't from the sharpshooter camp. Old armor, face lined with a sleepless night's exhaustion. When he saw the rescued patrol soldier and the captured White Wolf Guard, he knew immediately this was serious. The veteran scout gave him a quick summary. Barbarians grabbing prisoners to learn our troop numbers. Grain supply, wounded count, arrows and crossbow carts. And they'd set their sights on the west wall supply run. The duty centurion's face grew heavier with every word. He didn't curse. He didn't waste time. He gave orders immediately. Send the prisoner to the scout camp for further interrogation. Send the wounded patrol soldier to the medical camp. Pass the word to every unit. Troop strength, grain levels, casualties, and equipment losses are not to be discussed casually. Anyone caught spreading that kind of talk would be punished for leaking military intelligence. Then he turned to the soldiers beside him. Notify the supply office. Tomorrow's shipment of arrows and crossbow winch mechanisms to the west wall goes as planned. But double the escort. Before passing through Sheltered Gully, send scouts to sweep it first. His gaze landed on me and Old Hay. If the barbarians are targeting this shipment, they'll probably make their move tomorrow. The sharpshooter camp needs to send people to cover it. One Eye arrived shortly after. He heard the full report and asked only one question. What time is the transport? The duty centurion answered. Tomorrow before noon. Leaves from the rear camp. Goes through Sheltered Gully on the west side. Delivers to the west wall. One Eye nodded. Sharpshooter camp will send an archer squad to support. He looked at Old Hay. You lead. Old Hay nodded. Then One Eye looked at me. You go too. I didn't hesitate. All right. That shipment of arrows and winch mechanisms had to get through. If the west wall crossbow carts couldn't be repaired, the next time the barbarians pushed up with heavy shields and siege ladders, we'd have to hold them back with lives. The barbarians wanted to intercept it. We couldn't let them. The merit office people came by to register everything. One patrol soldier rescued. One White Wolf Guard captured alive. Several White Wolf Guards killed. Short bows, bone whistles, and short knives seized. And the intelligence about the barbarians grabbing prisoners for military information, all of it would be converted to military merit. I didn't ask how much. Not because I didn't care. Because right now there was something more urgent. Tomorrow's escort was the real life-or-death fight. The prisoner was taken away. The patrol soldier was carried to the medical camp. The duty centurion went to arrange security and the escort plan. The scout camp went to check Sheltered Gully. One Eye took me and Old Hay back to the sharpshooter camp to pick the team. Inside the camp, several archers had already been woken up. One Eye didn't give a long speech. He just dropped the seized bone whistle and short bow on the table. The barbarians are grabbing prisoners for intelligence. Tomorrow we escort arrows and crossbow winch mechanisms to the west wall. If we encounter White Wolf Guards, shoot the wolf handler first, then suppress the archers. Don't chase deep. Protect the cart. That's what winning looks like. The archers answered as one. I sat to the side and refilled my quiver. 1 arrow. 2 arrows. 3. Heavy arrows slid into the quiver, fletching lined up neatly. I set the iron core bow across my knees and wiped the snow water and blood from the limbs. Today's skirmish in the snow forest was just the beginning. The barbarians' granary was burned and their frontal assault had paused, but the war hadn't stopped. They'd keep grabbing prisoners, probing our defenses, intercepting supplies, targeting our equipment, searching for the weakest spot in Juma Pass to strike. On our side, we had to hold every single point. One cart of arrows, one winch mechanism, one stretch of wall, one ration of grain. These things don't sound as thrilling as a big battle, but lose any one of them, and the next assault costs more lives. I fastened my quiver and looked toward the west wall. I could faintly hear the sound of craftsmen hammering through the night, repairing crossbow carts. Tomorrow, that shipment has to get through. The barbarians want to stop it. We won't let them. Late night, just before dawn, I opened my eyes in the dark barracks. Before getting up, I listened. Boots crunching snow outside. Soldiers talking low. And from the west wall, the steady hammering of craftsmen still fixing crossbow carts. Each strike sounded like someone keeping Juma Pass alive in the storm. I sat up and reached for my gear. Iron core bow, still there. Quiver, still there. 24 heavy steel arrows, filled up last night, not one missing. I checked every single one by touch. Any cracks in the shaft, any looseness in the head, any fletching gone soft from snow water. Only after I confirmed everything did I strap the quiver tight. Old Hay was leaning by the door, holding his bow, watching me finish. He grinned. Wang Ji, you check your arrows more carefully than most men touch their wives. I slung the quiver on my back. A wife you lose, you can find another. An arrow breaks. The barbarians won't wait for me to go back to camp for a spare. Old Hay blinked. That doesn't sound like something a human would say. I hung the iron core bow on my shoulder. Words that keep you alive are good words. 3 other sharpshooter camp archers were already up. Nobody wore heavy armor. Padded jacket, old leather coat, bow, quiver. That was enough. Archers fear being slow. Wrap yourself in iron like a tin can, and when a barbarian short-bow archer pops up from behind a snow slope, you turn half a beat too late, and you're already dead. I looked at everyone. Let's go. No extra talk. When I had said everything last night, everyone understood. Today wasn't about collecting heads. It was about protecting the carts. The barbarians wanted to intercept arrows and crossbow winch mechanisms, not our lives. People could die. The carts couldn't be lost. We headed toward the rear camp along the back streets inside the pass. The rear camp sat behind the main fortress, built against the back mountain slope. A supply depot stacked with arrows, rolling logs, fire oil, spare crossbow arms, winch mechanisms, iron axles, and all kinds of military hardware. The walk was about 4 li, not far on a clear day, but now the snow was packed hard and slippery. I didn't rush. Along the way, I used the force dispersal footwork from treading snow without trace on every step. Nothing flashy, just not slamming my full weight down, letting the force spread through my foot, knee, and hip bit by bit. It didn't look fast, but my legs stayed loose. In snow, shallower footprints mean less wasted energy. Less wasted energy now might mean one more draw of the bow later when it counted. Nobody talked on the walk. The closer we got to the rear camp, the busier things became. Red glow from fire basins leaked through the snow fog. Mules snorting, axles creaking, supply soldiers cursing under their breath, craftsmen hammering wooden wedges, all mixed together in the cold, busy dawn. The rear camp was behind the main wall, supposedly safe ground. Normally, a few boxes of arrows could just be carried along the inner supply road. But this time was different. The west wall needed winch mechanisms and iron axles, heavy stuff that required carts. And the inner supply road on the west side had been half collapsed by firestones during the last attack. People could climb over the rubble, but carts couldn't pass. So the supply office had to take a dangerous route, out through the small western gate of the rear camp, along sheltered gully on the outside of the fortress wall, then back in through a repair gate below the west wall. About 12 or 13 li of detour. 7 or 8 of those li ran outside the main wall, with the fortress foundation and broken slopes on one side and snow gullies, scattered rocks, and old forest trails on the other. A full army couldn't push through there, but a small elite White Wolf Guard squad could easily hide on the snow slopes overnight and ambush a single cart. They didn't even need to break into the rear camp. All they had to do was flip the winch cart, bend the iron axles, or spook the mules to death, and the whole delivery would be ruined. When I reached the rear camp, the sky was barely turning light. The duty centurion from the supply office was waiting with clerks, craftsmen, sword and shield soldiers, and spearmen. He obviously hadn't slept either. His eyes were streaked with red. He didn't waste time on greetings when he saw us. Just waved at his clerk. "Sharpshooter camp's here. Count the carts." The clerk's fingers were red from the cold as he flipped through his ledger. First cart, 3 crates of arrowheads. Second cart, 1 set of crossbow winch mechanisms, 2 iron axles. Third cart, 6 bundles of ox sinew cord, plus wooden pins, iron nails, and a crate of spare parts. The centurion pointed at 3 narrow carts by the fire basin. "Everything's loaded. The west wall is waiting." He looked at me. No speech. No repeating last night's orders. Battlefield people hate wasted words. I just nodded. "I know." I walked over and checked the carts first, then studied the route. These weren't big carts. Big ones couldn't fit through sheltered gully. The gully was narrow with snow and rocks on both sides. A wide cart would get stuck on the turns. Getting stuck in the gully meant offering your neck to the barbarians. The first cart carried arrowheads in oilcloth-wrapped crates tied down with hemp rope. The second carried the winch mechanisms and iron axles, the heaviest load. The wheels were already sinking half an inch into the snow. 2 craftsmen stood beside it with wooden wedges and short axes, ready to prop wheels, fix axles, or clear obstacles at any moment. The third cart had the ox sinew cord, pins, nails, and small parts. Didn't look like much. But without these, the 2 half-wrecked crossbow carts on the west wall couldn't be repaired. And without those crossbow carts, the next time the barbarians came with heavy shields and siege ladders, the west wall would be missing 2 heavy fists. I ran through the positions in my head. 5 sharpshooter archers. I'd lead. Old Hay on the right flank, mobile. 1 archer watching the rear. 1 covering the right slope. 1 in the middle of the convoy, watching for short bow snipers popping up from the snow slopes. Sword and shield soldiers tied on the carts. Spearmen not too far from the convoy. Craftsmen stay by the winch cart, no charging forward. Scouts probe ahead, but not too deep. I tightened my bowstring. "Move out." Old Hay barked the order. The wheels crunched over packed snow with a heavy groan. The convoy left the rear camp. The wind was hard. The snow wasn't heavy, but the wind whipped fine crystals off the slopes and drove them into our faces like tiny needles. I walked the left slope, not hugging the carts. An archer pressed too close to the convoy gets tangled with the shield soldiers, and when arrows come from above, there's no room to even raise the bow. But not too far either. Too far and I can't get back if the carts are hit. So I picked a position halfway up the left slope. Look down, I could see the carts. Look up, I could see the ridge. Under my feet, it wasn't flat ground, but snow-covered rocks. Every step took effort. I used treading snow without trace on each step, sole touching snow first, weight spreading gradually through ankle, knee, and hip. Slow, but my prints were shallow. More importantly, it didn't burn out my legs. About 15 minutes in, a tingling sensation spread through my waist and hip. Not injury, the system correcting me. I'd rushed 1 step, heel punching into the snow, half my leg sinking with it. The next instant, a needle-like prick hit the outside of my knee, dragging my center of gravity back to the front of my foot. I sucked in cold air and lightened my step again. +3. I didn't smile, just memorized the feeling. Footwork isn't for show. Sink 1 inch less, waste 1 less bit of strength. Waste 1 less bit of strength. Chase 1 more step or live 1 more breath. The scout came back. No tripwires at the entrance. Old cart tracks under the snow. Passable. Old Hay asked about the slopes. The scout shook his head. He could only check nearby. Higher up, the snow was deep and the brush too thick to push through. Old Hay didn't curse him. That was already enough. I looked ahead. The entrance to sheltered gully was like a white crack squeezed between 2 mountain walls. The slopes on both sides weren't tall, but they were shaded and grim. The wind that roared outside got blocked by the rock walls, and inside the gully, it was strangely quiet, like someone stuffed cotton in your ears. The quieter it was, the easier it hid killing intent. I spoke up. "Slow down." Old Hay looked at me. "See something?" I didn't answer right away. I was staring at a patch of brush near the gully mouth on the left slope. The snow there was very flat. Too clean. Winter snow on a mountain slope shouldn't be that smooth. Dead branches poke through, stones push up ridges. Wind carves fine lines in the surface. But that patch looked like someone had smoothed it over. About the size of a bed. Most people would assume the wind did it. I'd spent 3 months on Green Bull Ridge before. When you step on snow and then cover it with more snow, it looks different from snow that fell naturally. I couldn't name the exact differences, but I knew it was wrong. Old Hay didn't ask more. He raised his hand. Cart slow. The driver reined in the mules immediately. Shield soldiers brought their shields forward. Spearmen tightened formation. The right side archer raised his bow. The instant the cart slowed, a short, sharp bone whistle sounded from the right slope of the gully mouth. 2 white shapes burst from snow nests on the right slope, charging straight at the mules pulling the second cart. Snow wolves. Their target wasn't people, it was the mules. Spook the mules, the cart goes wild. Cart goes wild, the winch gets stuck in the gully mouth. My eyes went cold. Just as I expected, they were after the cart. I didn't shoot the wolves. Wolves are just claws. The person controlling them is the hand. My gaze swept past the wolves, following the whistle's direction upward. Behind a crooked dead tree on the right slope, the bottom edge of a fir cap sat pressed very low. The man was well hidden. Only a sliver of his jaw showed. But when he blew the whistle, his throat moved. I let my feet slide down the slope, left knee bending slightly, center of gravity dropping. My bow was already up. I released. The heavy arrow left the string. No scream through the air. No piercing whistle. The wolf handler was about to blow a second command when his neck suddenly jerked backward. The arrowhead drilled through his throat and pinned through the back of his neck, knocking the bone whistle and a spray of blood into the snow. The whistle died. The 2 wolves lost their rhythm mid-lunge. The shield soldiers seized that half-beat. 3 shields slammed forward at once. The first wolf crashed into a shield, claws scraping out a horrible screech. A spear jabbed through the shield gap into its shoulder. The second wolf circled faster, trying to hit the mule's flank. One of our archers shot first, putting an arrow through its eye socket. The beast tumbled sideways, crashed into the cart shaft, and sprayed blood across half the cart. The mule panicked, front hooves stamping wildly. The driver held the reins with everything he had, face white as snow but hands locked tight. "Hold the cart," Old Hay roared. 2 shield soldiers threw themselves against the second cart, bracing it with their shoulders. The craftsman didn't hide either. He grabbed a wooden wedge, dove under the wheel, and jammed it in place before the wheel could twist. Right then, while everyone was focused on the wolves, that too smooth patch of snow on the left slope exploded open. 3 white wolf guards rolled out from under the surface, wearing snow-colored hides, faces smeared with gray-white mud. One held a short bow. One had a curved blade. The last one carried a rope with iron hooks. Their target was clear. Not killing people. Hooking the cart. Get the hook onto the winch cart's axle. Have a couple men pull from the slope, and the whole cart tips over. Cart tips. Heavy load rolls into the gully. Winch and axles get bent. Delivery ruined. I'd been watching that patch of snow. So when they moved, I moved. My toes caught the slope. Instead of jumping down hard, I slid along the snow surface, gliding 3 feet diagonally. That slide dodged the short bow archer's first arrow. It hissed past my shoulder and stuck in the snow behind me. My waist and hip turned with the momentum, not stopping for an instant. +3. My second heavy arrow was already knocked. The short bow archer wanted another shot. He didn't get one. I fired low, the arrow skimming over a shield's edge, punching through his chest, and sending him flipping backward into the snow pit. The third man had already flung the iron hook. It arced through the air in a black line, about to catch the left axle of the second cart. I couldn't shoot the man in time. I shot the rope instead. My third heavy arrow grazed past the cart shaft and hit the hemp rope dead center. The rope tore apart. The hook lost its force and clanged down beside the wheel. That white wolf guard's face changed. He dropped the rope, drew his blade, and tried to dive under the cart. I didn't need to follow up. Old Hay was already there. He stomped on the hook rope, reversed his short knife, and slashed past the shield soldier's flank. One flash of the blade, and the man's wrist was cut open. Next instant, a shield smashed into his face. The crack of bone was dull and final. He went down. Old Hay spat. "Damn, you really thought nobody was watching the cart." The curved blade white wolf guard on the left slope didn't stay to fight. Short bow archer dead. Hook attempt failed. He pulled back immediately. As he retreated, he reached into his coat for a small bone whistle. A signaler. My fourth heavy arrow went out. Not at his throat, not at his chest. At his hand. The arrowhead pinned through his wrist, shattering the whistle into two pieces, leaving half his palm dangling from a bush branch. He screamed. Before the sound finished, our right side archer put an arrow through his thigh. Two shield soldiers rushed up and pressed him into the snow. I didn't watch him. I looked deeper into the gully. The first wave was the hook attempt. What about the second wave? If the barbarians knew the cart carried winch mechanisms, they wouldn't send just a handful of men on a gamble. Sure enough, from deeper in the gully, a crude wooden frame came tumbling down from the snow slope. Not a cart, a makeshift rack lashed together from dead trees, studded with sharpened stakes, dragging snow and rocks as it rolled down to block the road ahead. It didn't need to kill anyone. Just block the path. Once the convoy was stuck in the gully, short-bow archers on the slopes could pick us apart slowly. Old Hay's face changed. Front cart halt. The first cart stopped hard. The other two followed. In a narrow gully, the worst thing when carts stop is panic. I ignored the wooden frame. Let the shield soldiers and craftsmen handle it. I looked up, searching for people. If someone pushed that frame, there were still enemies on the slopes. Upper right, two barbarian short-bow archers popped over the ridge, bows already drawn. They didn't aim at me. They didn't aim at Old Hay. They aimed at the cart driver. Kill the driver. Nobody controls the mule, and the carts jam up even worse. I pushed off the left slope, climbing 2 steps diagonally. Dangerous footing, 1 step on a rock edge, 1 in a snow pocket. Before, my foot would have sunk straight in. This time, my sole caught the rock edge first, my hips settled back, the force scattered through the side of my knee, and I held position on that slant. +4. Fifth arrow knocked. The first short-bow archer on the right slope had just released his shot when my arrow arrived. The silent, heavy arrow punched into the side of his face. His own arrow went wild, thudding into the snow beside the driver's feet. The driver's face went white, but he held on. Sixth arrow right after. The second short-bow archer was faster. He ducked behind a rock. My arrow didn't hit his head, but it punched through his shoulder blade where it stuck out past the stone. He screamed and tumbled down the slope. Our right side archer finished him with a follow-up shot. Up front, the shield soldiers reached the wooden frame. It was heavy with rocks underneath, couldn't be dragged away quickly. A craftsman was sweating, hacking at the ropes with an axe. "Hurry," Old Hay yelled. "Don't let the carts die here." I caught movement from the corner of my eye at the second cart. The mule was still trembling. The wheel was wedged, but one more scare and it could twist. Then, from deep in the left side of the gully, came a low growl. A third snow wolf, bigger than the first two. It didn't charge out immediately. It pressed low, creeping along the gully wall's shadow, circling toward the back of the second cart. This one wasn't charging blind. Someone was controlling it. I looked behind the wolf instantly. No one visible. I narrowed my eyes. The handler wasn't behind the wolf. Then he was up high. I looked up. Behind a snow-covered boulder on the upper left, a tiny bit of black leather cord was showing. No whistle this time. This one was using hand signals and a leather cord. They'd gotten smarter. I thought to myself coldly, smart ones are worth an arrow even more. I couldn't shoot him yet. The angle was wrong. He was hidden behind the boulder, only the cord showing. Shooting the cord was useless. Shooting the rock was worse. I shifted my feet and slid down the left slope. Not retreating, changing angle. The snow slope was slippery with rocks below. If I lost control on this slide, I'd roll under the cart wheels. I locked my waist and hip tight, pushing treading snow without trace to its limit. Sole against the snow, knees slightly bent, body sliding down the slope face like a plank, fast but controlled. +4. The angle opened. Half the wolf handler's face came into view behind the boulder. 7th heavy arrow off the string. The man seemed to sense something wrong and jerked back to hide. Too late. The arrowhead went in through his left eye and blew a mist of blood out the back of his skull. The third wolf hesitated for just one beat. That beat saved the cart. It had already reached the back of the second cart, claws nearly touching the mule's legs. I was still sliding, no time to angle a heavy arrow. I pulled a light arrow from my waist. A light arrow doesn't hit as hard as a heavy one, but it's fast enough. I put it into the wolf's rear leg tendon. The wolf howled, its lunge veering sideways, slamming into the cart's tailboard and shaking the whole vehicle. 2 shield soldiers threw themselves at it, eyes red. Shields pinned the wolf's head. blade stabbed into its belly. Old Hay charged in too, driving his knife into the side of its neck. Hot blood sprayed across the snow, steaming in the cold air. "Hold the cart," I shouted. Not loud, but enough to cut through the panic. The driver clenched the reins, jaw locked so tight his teeth were grinding. The craftsman hammered a second wedge under the wheel. Holding. Up ahead, the wooden frame was finally half chopped apart. Spearmen and shield soldiers dragged the sharpened stakes toward the gully wall. The path wasn't wide, but a cart could fit through. Old Hay called out immediately, "First cart, go." The arrow cart crept forward, wheels crunching over broken wood. It lurched once. Everyone's heart lurched with it, but it didn't tip. The second cart was the hardest. That thing was so heavy. The moment the wheels moved, they started sinking into the left snow pit. The craftsman's face went white. "Left wheel's sinking," Old Hay swore. "Wedge it." The craftsman grabbed a board and shoved it under the wheel. But there were still enemies on the slopes. A short arrow came whistling down from the upper right, aimed straight at the back of the craftsman's neck. I'd just killed the wolf handler and hadn't fully steadied myself. No time to aim carefully. I fired my 8th heavy arrow on instinct alone. It didn't hit a person. It intercepted the short arrow midair. The two shafts collided, knocking the enemy arrow off course. It buzzed past the craftsman's ear and disappeared. The craftsman dropped onto his backside in the snow, then gritted his teeth and crawled back to keep wedging the wheel. The archer on the slope was clearly stunned by what just happened. Old Hay seized the moment and fired, forcing the man back behind his rock. "Push the cart," Old Hay yelled. Shield soldiers, spearmen, everyone threw their weight against the second cart. I put away my bow and went forward too. I wasn't being a hero trying to lift the cart alone. That would be stupid. I just put my shoulder against the most stable spot on the cart's side, planted my foot on a rock root under the snow, and used the iron rhino technique to channel force from the ground through my waist and back and into my shoulder. Heavy. So heavy. The winch and iron axles made the cart feel like a dead ox. The old bruise on my chest got jolted and dull pain surged up. I bit down hard. Push. Everyone pushed together. The wheel inched out of the snow pit. The board underneath groaned and cracked. The craftsman was flat on the ground beside the wheel, hand nearly crushed, but he didn't pull back. Finally, the cart jolted. The left wheel came up. +2 for Iron Rhino. Honest points. They nearly split my chest open getting them. Go. The second cart passed the narrow point. The third small cart followed. Only when all three were past the blockade did the crushing pressure inside the gully ease up a little. The barbarians on the slopes didn't push another attack. They could see the carts were moving. The convoy hadn't panicked. 2 wolf handlers dead, 3 short bow archers down. Hook attempt failed, roadblock didn't hold. Pushing further risked losing everyone for nothing. A gray shape on the right slope turned and bolted, short and stocky, a short bow on his back, 2 bone whistles at his waist, moving fast. The squad leader. Old Hay's eye sharpened. That's the commander. One of our archers instinctively moved to chase. I grabbed his shoulder. Don't, he protested. He's the leader. I watched the gray figure vanish into the snow forest. My voice was steady. The carts are still in the gully. His head isn't worth as much as the winch. Old Hay had been about to go too. Hearing that, he pulled his foot back. He spat blood-tinged saliva. Damn. Now I know why One Eye put you in charge. I didn't respond. Because I wanted to shoot him too. That squad leader definitely carried military merit. But no amount of merit was worth trading a whole cart of winch mechanisms for. The convoy kept moving. This time nobody spoke. Shield soldiers pressed even tighter against the carts. The scout stayed within 30 steps ahead, close enough to fall back fast if something happened. I went back to my position on the left slope. My footsteps were lighter than when we started. Not because my light body skill was perfected, but those slides, dodges, and force borrows during the fight had ground treading snow without trace into my legs for real. The panel kept ticking, +3, +4. I didn't linger on the numbers. We weren't safe yet. The rest of the gully wasn't long, but we moved painfully slow. Every turn, shield soldiers went first. Every odd-looking patch of snow, the scout tested it with a pole. Craftsmen stayed right beside the wheels, boards ready. Old Hay stopped talking entirely. Every archer had an arrow on the string, eyes scanning both slopes. Another half-hour passed. The wind got louder ahead. The gully was ending. But that didn't mean safety. I actually got more tense. Many ambushes don't come at the deepest part of a gully. They come near the exit. People see the opening and relax. When the mind relaxes, the blade slows, the eyes dull. I raised my hand. Slow. This time nobody asked why. The convoy slowed immediately. The scout went ahead, lay flat at the exit, and watched for a long time before waving the all clear. Outside the exit, no large enemy force. Just 2 soldiers sent from the west wall, crouching behind a low rock, waving a small flag to signal the road was open. They were still some distance from the gully mouth. That made sense. If you put a big group right at the exit, the barbarians would spot them from far away and wouldn't set the ambush here at all. The carts came out one by one. Only when the third small cart cleared the gully mouth did everyone gasp like they'd been pulled out of water. I looked back. Sheltered gully was still and quiet. On the snow slopes, only a few corpses and torn open snow pits remained. The fight hadn't been big. No thousands screaming on the battlements. No sky-high flames. But every single person's back was soaked through with sweat. Because we all knew, if any one part had gone wrong, the second cart would have flipped in the gully, lose the winch, and the west wall keeps fighting with broken crossbow carts. Old Hay walked up and looked at the spot on my shoulder where the cart had scraped through my padded armor. Wang Ji, you okay? I rolled my shoulder. Chest was still a bit tight. Palm was numb from intercepting that arrow. But nothing was broken. Not dead. Old Hay nodded. Then we're good. I looked at him. We're good when the cart arrives. He grinned, but kept his mouth shut for once. 2 more Li and the craftsmen's shed below the west wall appeared through the snow fog. People were already waiting. Several craftsmen saw the winch cart, and their eyes lit up. An old craftsman with a frost-white beard rushed forward. He checked the winch first, then the iron axles, and only then bothered to look at people. Not bent. A supply soldier patted the cart. Don't know about bent. Our lives almost got bent. The old craftsman ignored him, ran his hands over the iron axles, crouched to inspect the gear teeth. Once he confirmed nothing was cracked, he let out a long breath. It works. Those 2 words loosened half the tension around us. On the battlefield, it works, is the best thing you can hear. The arrowhead crates were unloaded. West Wall soldiers counted them one by one. The supply clerk, fingers red from cold, wrote everything down with a charcoal pencil. 3 crates of arrowheads. 1 winch set. 2 iron axles. 6 bundles of ox sinew cord. Wooden pins, iron nails, small parts, 1 crate. At the end he wrote 4 more characters. Cargo not lost. When he wrote those words, he looked up at us. Cargo not lost. That was the biggest merit from this escort run. Old Hay sidled over and asked quietly, Wang Ji, how much merit you think this run's worth? I shook my head. Don't know. He seemed surprised. You're not counting? I watched the craftsman carry the winch toward the half-wrecked crossbow cart. When that thing gets mounted and kills barbarians next time, that's the real account. Old Hay paused, then laughed. Your accounting keeps getting bigger. I didn't laugh. I just watched the west wall. Up top, soldiers were clearing broken frames. Craftsmen hauled the winch up and crowded around the crossbow cart, pulling out the old axle. The snowy plain beyond was gray-white and flat. The barbarian camp direction was eerily quiet. After their granary burned, they'd stopped the big assaults, but their hands hadn't stopped. Grabbing prisoners, extracting intelligence, intercepting supplies. Next it might be burning crossbow carts, raiding the medical camp, cutting water routes, or hitting night patrols. War isn't only about smashing into walls head-on. Most of the time, it's cutting. Cut by cut. Cut until your carts can't get through. Cut until your arrows run out. Cut until your wounded can't be saved. Cut until you still have men on the wall, but nothing left for them to use. I looked down at my hands. The old scar on my palm had split open again. The blood beads were tiny and dried quickly in the cold wind. I pulled up my panel. Name, Wang Qing. Lifespan, 18/117. Realm, Peak of Skin Tempering. Basic Archery, Great Accomplishment, 4,624 out of 10,000. Iron Rhino Body Tempering, Small Accomplishment, 852 out of 5,000. 8 Extremes Frame, Perfected Max. 2 Form Stance, Perfected Max. Loach Technique, Perfected Max. Treading Snow Without Trace, Not Yet Learned, 73 out of 100. 73. This run took me from 55 to 73. 27 points left until entry level. I breathed out slowly, a white cloud in the cold. Close, but not enough yet. Treading snow without trace wasn't even at entry level, and it had already helped me survive several times in that gully. What about once I formally learned it? What about small accomplishment? What about the day I could merge it with Loach technique? My gaze hardened. The barbarians wanted to find me. Huyengu would learn my name sooner or later. When that happened, the hunters chasing me through the snow forest wouldn't be just a few small squads. I needed to be faster, steadier, and harder to kill. Right then, a heavy mechanical clunk echoed from the west wall. The new winch had been mounted. Several craftsmen turned it together. That half-wrecked crossbow cart slowly raised its head. The thick crossbow arms spread open in the wind and snow, like an iron beast opening its eyes again. A wave of restrained cheers broke out among the soldiers on the wall.